Well, hi everybody. Welcome to Stratosphere Lounge. I'm your host, Bill Whittle, and we always joke about flawless launches, but this one actually was. What do you know about that? Um, Hope everybody's doing well. I was busy last week. I was out doing some fun stuff all week long. Starting last Tuesday morning, I was up around 6 and had to be on location at 8, and we shot um, 13 episodes of the Cold War on video. Three the first day and then two every day after that. I don't know what it was. I know on the first day they said I read, I think it was 48 pages of 48 pages of single space content, whole width, and it felt like it. But it was a tremendous crew. It was a tremendous job. I couldn't be happier with the results. The set was fantastic. We um, we had the had a different costume for every episode, so 13 costume changes. They were all kind of that 60s, early 60s kind of thing. So that was great. Hi to everybody who's saying hi. Um, and um, and it was just a complete blast. Somebody's asked, is it the same stuff as on the air? Yes, it is. As a matter of fact, when they made the move, there were a couple of switches out with producers. Daily Wire, when they moved from LA, I recorded the Cold War, what we saw as audio only, a couple of years ago now. I think it was probably end of 2019, early 2020. It was before the pandemic, and it was after Apollo 11, so probably last days of 2019, I would say. And when I recorded it the first time, we, I'd write a script, and then they'd schedule time. I'd go in and record the one script. So it was, I don't know, 13 different recording sessions, I guess. But this time, we were just pounding them out, and because of that little switch, they couldn't get a hold of the original final shooting scripts. So we had to take the actual episodes that aired, and then we had to do an audio transcript of those and reformat them. And unfortunately, there were enough bugs in that, mostly in terms of punctuation, that after the first one or two recordings, we realized that the just the simplest way to do it would be for me to get in the chair and just read through the whole thing. Now, some of these, the longest one was 24 pages long. It's an hour and a half. And so twice a day, I'd come in, I'd read all of it through, just glib it through, and that should be a comma. What's that word? Fasts? That doesn't make any, it just doesn't make any sense. Lasts. It's supposed to be lasts. And that kind of thing. So actually recorded 26 episodes of the Cold War. It is really, really great. Oh, and thank you very much for that. What's that? Anawayas song? Please hit the like button. It helps, believe it or not. So anyway, it was epic, and it took me away from everything. As really getting there. Had to be there at 8. Often didn't get out till after 7, and a lot of reading and a lot of stuff like that. But in any event, and thank you for the kind words there, Jaeger, and everybody else. In any event, it's a 43-year history, and I've forgotten how much I liked it. It's really, really great. So people are asking two questions. Number one, when will it be ready? And number two, will it be available on billwhittle.com? They are hoping to have it finished by December. I don't see any way that it can be on billwhittle.com. The simple fact of it is that the Cold War, like several of the other things, were jobs I basically had to take to keep billwhittle.com rolling along. And I like doing them, don't get me wrong. I think Apollo 11 is the best work I ever did. But they are paying for it. It's a work for hire. And they have their own streaming service, Daily Wire Plus. And I signed up for Daily Wire Plus because I wanted to watch the Apollo 11 series. I have a pretty good feeling that they probably would have given me a free membership, but I didn't want to ask them. And, I know things are tight now for everybody, but that one, we're all on the same team. I almost consider that to be like almost like a tax deduction. Anything we do for the team is just great. So in any event, it is an epic, 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 epic history, and the two highlights of which were going into it. I remember the two segments I liked the best were Project Azorian and Operation Bolo. And having just read through them both again, I realized, nope, that's it. Those are the high points. They're fantastic. So there's that. Somebody have asked if I vote already. Yes. In fact, since we have mail-in ballots and we still have another week, I've not only voted here in California, it gives me plenty of time and opportunity to vote several times before Election Day, and I'm looking forward to scooping up all of those unfilled out ballots and just mailing them in. And we'll talk about the election, obviously, in a few minutes here. We had to cancel a couple of Stratosphere Studio shows because of that shoot. And I'm sorry to say we're going to have to cancel the one on Monday as well, because on Monday, I don't know, a week ago, I guess, got an invitation from our friends over at Daily Wire. And they asked me if I wanted to come out to Nashville and do their election night coverage with them as kind of a, plug-in monkey. And I said, yeah, man, I'm down for that. Absolutely. That's great. So I will be in Nashville for the election results, and I'll probably be a color commentator as usual. But nevertheless, it was really fun. It was a fun place to be in 2020, and I get the feeling it's going to be a much better outcome than 2020. And I don't think that, well, I don't know, I'm not going to keep saying this, but basically, as I said, you get one sneak attack per war, right? You get one time when nobody's looking at the radar, or nobody's confronting the guy at the front of the airplane who says he's got a bomb. So in any event, I'm really excited about that, and I've got a couple shows to pitch to the gang over there, and so I'll be leaving Monday, back on Wednesday. Eric Gott says you should book a one-way flight. Look, I tell you, Eric, and the rest of you, it's challenging being out here, and if I wasn't married, things might be a little different, but I am, so they're not. And Russ says he misses the firewall videos, and I do too, and I'll get to that in just a second because we have some interesting ideas I think we're going to get to. Action Comtexis in the Twitch stream says, Daily Wire put all your previous stuff on YouTube for limited time only. Can't afford Daily Wire. All I can afford is BillWhittle.com. Well, that's the correct decision to make anyway, thank you. And it's only subscription I have. The choice for me is one or the other, not both. Boring Shapiro on YouTube, and the last time I'm going to see it. So, look, I'm going to go and talk to them in person. It's not something I want to do over email. It's something I want to do buddy to buddy, and presumably over a great deal of scotch. But what I'm going to try to do, and I don't want anybody to get their hopes up on this because they're shrewd businessmen, and I am not. Hey, a Brook College student, hold that thought. And yes, I'd love to talk about it in a minute. I am going to ask them if it is possible to get a private link that we can allow our members to see it. I think the chance of that happening is slim, but I'm going to try because I really like to be able to do that. And it's not a super large, impact on them. But as I said, these guys are actual professional businessmen, and it's in their interest to not do it. So, limited time run, that's a good idea. That actually sweetens the pot quite a bit there, Lord Sank. I think they'd like that much better, actually, if I were to say, hey, how about if we just do it for 3 days or a week or something? I think that might be more. I think that might be more palpable to them. In fact, I know it'd be more palpable. And I said palpable. I meant to say palatable. And yeah, it would be great. And I can tell them, hey, man, that's a chance for you to sign up all those BillWhittle.com members for Daily Wire Plus. Okay, so there's that. We I still have not responded to the person who wrote this email. It's one of the most amazing emails I've ever gotten, and it was hers talking about a split on revenues. We don't have. They're not going to split revenues. It's either going to be a favor that they're going to do, or because just the bookkeeping is really difficult, and they don't have to, right? They paid me, and then they paid me again to do the shoot, so it's theirs, and I couldn't be happier with them and grateful to them. And I would advise you to go and watch it on Daily Wire Plus. I will ask, but as I said, I think the chances are pretty close to zero. In any event, I got an email several weeks ago, which I have not answered yet, to my undying shame. And the person who wrote it usually watches this on Friday morning. So if you wrote the email, you know who you are. And I take this opportunity to thank you not only for the really good insights, but also for the extraordinarily kind words. So that's a personal thanks, and I owe you one. Okay, so here's the thing. I believe I mentioned this before. I got an email from somebody who said that successful videos on YouTube are successful along three axes, so like a three-dimensional problem. And he wrote that one axis is time, one axis is authenticity, and the third axis is fun. And they pointed out, probably more delicately and gently than I deserve, to be honest with you, that the show that we put out the most, Right Angle, is actually in the dead zone of all three of those axes. It's Right Angle is too long to be short video, and it's too short to be a long video. It's taken me a long time to come to realize that a lot of people just listen to this, and I've listened to other people's long format podcasts. Hey, Chris, and and so that's where you want to be. You either want to be 2 minutes or less, or you want to be long enough so that you can kind of just put it on and then not have to keep worrying about, finding a new version. So we're in the dead zone on that. On the authenticity and the fun axes, they're not at zero, but they're in the middle. They're in the dead zone. So for example, the way we do them now, right angles are not scripted, but they're not exactly spontaneous either. We are giving spontaneous answers, but we're giving the spontaneous answers to questions that we already know are coming and that we have discussed. And so I gave that a great deal of thought. And furthermore, and certainly this isn't the only person to say that. Most of you who are watching now live have said this at one point or another. Another set of another problem with the format the way we have it now is that we film it on Tuesday mornings, and that means that from Tuesday morning till Tuesday morning, that's the news that we can talk about. So if something happens on Tuesday afternoon, we don't get to it for a week, at which time it's old news. So based on a number of suggestions and a number of comments from all you folks, again, I don't have this completely iced, but I did talk to Stephen Scott about it. Let's skip the step. So we were doing the backstage show live that we have for members only at BillWhittle.com. And that is where we first get to see these things. That's our first take on it. And it's a lot more fun, and we spend a lot more time just goofing around talking about, cartoons and music and all the rest of that stuff. So we got in. We did our backstage show as usual, and the topic I brought was this article that was on this idea of COVID amnesty, and I were again it, and Steve were again it, and Scott was for it, and the conversation got pretty heated. It didn't get nasty, but it was enthusiastic. And towards the end of that, because it went on for 15, 20 minutes, towards the end of that, I realized this stuff that's going on right now is much better than what we would do when we get to doing this the way we normally do it. So I said, hey guys, you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to make this week's, my segment, the COVID amnesty segment, I would like to make that my regular show for the week as a test run. So that's what we did. So again, we don't have any of this exactly locked down, but it's real close. What we are hoping to do is we are hoping to turn right angle into maybe 45 minutes to an hour live and 3 times a week, so that we would get, again, I don't want to commit to this because we're still working it out, but if I had my druthers, what we would do is 3 times a week we would come in. Each one of us would bring a topic for the day. We would broadcast the show live. When we were done, we'd have about an hour, about an hour segment. We'd post that segment. Then we would take that hour and we would give it to our editor, and then we'd edit out my segment, Steve's segment, Scott's segments. Those would be about 15, 20 minutes each. And then we would take the best 30 seconds from each one of them, and then we'd put that on YouTube as a short. And I think that's a much, 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 much better idea. We have a lot more fun on the backstage show because, we kind of feel like nobody's watching, but that's the authenticity axis, right? So, it's a lot of this is just you're bringing, meaning at least me and probably a lot of other people too. Not only is it a question of me coming into this internet video world from a television background. Oh, and by the way, when we do this new format, no opening credit rolls, no music, nothing, right? So all of that stuff, like the opening credits, got an After Effects template from, I don't know, almost 8 years ago now. So all that's going to go, and and by the way, for the show this week on COVID amnesty, this will be the new format. It's just the three of us live, real time, and so that's kind of the test run. And because it's the test run, we just put it on. It's like, bam, here it is. And then at the end, we go back to our regular 3-panel format and say, hey, this is what we've been thinking about doing and what I think would really work. And so just a little explanation so people don't get frightened and confused by all this new stuff. But in any event, I think that's really, really exciting. So that leaves the question of what do I do? Especially if we're doing, like Friday Night Tight style, exactly. It'll be or drinker after hours. So it'll be live, and then like I said, it'll be a long version. There'll be a 20-minute versions, 3 20-minute versions, and then 3 30-second versions. So this right angle came out of the format of Trifecta, so it's a 12-year-old show now. And it's time to change. So it's hard to get out of old. It's not even habits really. It's more like styles, probably a better word. So in any event, that's it. Script, all the graphics and all that stuff are going away. Nobody cares. Everybody's seen it before. What matters now, and this again, I'm so grateful to this incredible 6-page analysis of this. Authenticity, fun, speed, that kind of thing. That's what there is now. So that's what we're going to do. I think, and we're going to have to do a lot of budget cutting around here too. I think we're going to close off some of the studio space. We're just going to tighten up the ship, and then we'll see if we can get some more members. Now, so the question is, what about me? What do I do? I haven't done a Moving Back to America in almost probably 2 months. I've just been whacked with this Daily Wire stuff, which I am required to do, not because of Daily Wire, but I'm required to do it because I need that cash infusion to keep the doors open here. So, having just finished the Cold War and being right smack in the middle of the Soviet secret police thing, there was a lot of writing. I think the answer is for me to do one written thing a week, which would probably be firewalls. They'd probably be somewhat shorter and not quite so. Here's every single thing you need to know about that, but it would be written. So I got to listen to the sound of my own voice quite a lot in the last week, and and uh, and so I think that's it. And certainly the most feedback we get. So I'm thinking, I'll just kind of do it that way. I've mentioned this a few times before. One of the things I've got basically just sitting here ready to go is something on understanding the national anthem. You know, everybody sings a song, and very few people. I know virtually all of you listening now understand what the song's about, but we have never. I'm not aware that anyone has ever broken the song down. Not so much from its historical point of view, but okay, Wizard, thanks. Not so much from its historical point of view, but from its emotional point of view. So that's probably 4 or 5 minutes, and if I put a firewall thing on it, it looks a little more permanent. And that's permanent. That's the word. That's the word that comes to mind here. So if we open up these right angles, we'll be covering the news stuff, and we'll be covering it a lot better. And there's no point in me doing either a live or an hour commentary on news if we're doing that with Trifecta, especially if we're doing it 3 times a week. So the thing I realized about during the time I was doing the Cold War is those things and the firewalls and stuff. There's an evergreen quality to them. Ideally they're permanent. They're about bigger things. Right now I'm under a tremendous writing burden, and I probably will be for a while. So I think I just need to keep them simpler and shorter and just get out as many as I possibly can. But in any event, that seems like a good alternative to that. And then just the last thing, and then I guess we'll just dive into questions and stuff. Also, there's just there's some fruit that's just such low high end fruit. It's practically underground and just sitting there rotting away. There's you can support the channel on YouTube. There are the super chats that everybody's been talking about. There's obviously Patreon, and our website does not have any options to pay through either Zelle or Venmo or PayPal or anything like that. No, a lot of people don't particularly like that, but or send in a check really. So yeah, we're just going to have to. The plan is to just really re-rig the ship and tighten it up and scrape the barnacles off the hull and see if we can't get some more speed out of this old girl. So that's what we're planning to do. Alrighty then. I think I saw where to go. Hang on, beg pardon. Scrolling. Broke college student, do you want to pop that in there? And I will take a look at BillWhittle.com first, and then we'll see if we can get over to Facebook. So let's do that. Ah, oh, Mamma Mia. Come on, baby. Looking to parallel economy. Is that like a online bank or something? We work with Recurly, but anyway. All right, let me put this over here. You go over there, and then you come back here so I can see both streams. Yeah, that's good. That's good. All right. All right. All right. Just because I said I would, and because he's a fine fellow and outstanding member of the non-deceased demographic here at the Stress for Lunch, I'm going to get to this one first from our friend Broke College student, who's been really Outstanding. So the question is, again, it's in the Twitch stream live here. What do you think about the Urim Douglas debate? I've never heard of it. The event was a panel during NatCon 2020 in which the topic of allying religious conservatives and classic liberals Urim's main points were that it was difficult for non-rebellious youth to fly straight and narrow, get married, and raise a family. His point that the Christian majority is unable to a large extent raise their children religiously through the removal of school prayer, etc. Douglas's main point was that things have happened that need to be accepted, like the pill, and that there's no putting the genie back in the bottle. Also raises the point that there was never a time in which things were easy between the sexes. Well, I'll tell you what, that's a heck of a question. And somebody pointed out Dan Bongino's alternative to PayPal, so I'll get into that too. All right, so I didn't see the debates, but I could probably spin off something about that. I'll preface it by saying that just the entire trend during the last 17 years, I think, since I published the book Silent America, the country is much more divided than it was then, and even then I was writing about the beginning of the Iraq War and stuff. So there is a tendency, and we've talked about this several times, and we've experienced it several times, not only me, but Scott and Steve and Zoe and everybody else, I'm sure. And basically the phenomenon is something like this. Everything we believe is under so much attack from so many different vectors for so long, and it's so hard and tragic, and fills you full of despair and dismay to see all the damage that's being done. So I think what happens with conservatives is that they get so used to being in their trenches. They're so used to constantly just being on guard, Charlie's coming through the wire kind of thing, and it makes us jumpy. And this leads to the that's Stu. Bring that back, Stu, if you get a chance. So that leads to us getting jumpy, and the end result of this is I followed you for 15 years and been a big supporter, but then you said something that I disagree with, so now you're dead to me. I understand the dynamic. Believe me, I understand the dynamic. When everything you believe in and everything that either you or your ancestors fought for is just being chipped away all the time by these people who are evil, rotten, evil bastards who are doing this intentionally and using your own goodwill against you, it gets to the point where anybody who's not speaking the orthodoxy can get flamed from behind. And the whole point of this philosophy of individualism is, you arrive at the truth through debate. So this, I think, is one of the problems that we have in the Republican Party. And just to address the debate issues. Hang on. By the way, when I'm recording, I drink like a frickin' camel. When I'm doing a live speaking event too, I think I probably went through 8 or 9 bottles of water in the course of a couple hours last week. Anyway, all right. So here's what I'm trying to say. Right. We have found ourselves in an age that's so combative and so divisive that if we hear anything that is different from our opinion on it, we kind of think, oh, okay, this is another attempt to to break through the cracks and widen the destruction. But that ain't necessarily so. And that's my first hot take on the issue of the debate. If I understand the debate correctly, young people don't want to be part of the Sunday morning, revival tent, and the older people don't want to loosen their standards, for which is what this whole thing's about, in order to make the tent bigger. Everybody knows we want to make a big tent, but you don't want to make such a big tent that you let anybody into it, because the reason that there is a tent is to preserve these kind of values. So this is where the friction is, and this is where the problem is in terms of getting young people to be what we would call more conservative. We cannot, And at the same time, and Zoe's pointed this out, we actually shot our virtue signals today as usual, and we were about 2 minutes out of finishing the second one. We do them all in one take, so we've been talking for nearly an hour. And just as we're wrapping up the second one, boom, power just out. I thought it was California, but it's kind of windy today, so we lost everything, and we'll have to shoot it again tomorrow, I'm hoping. Yeah, and Marusha says conservatives have an image of being old prudes. Okay, that's fair enough. That's pretty much true. So here's where I'm going with this. I think in our heads we all need to understand that things are so desperate and in such trouble that we need to, as a start, we need to realize that without allies, without votes, nothing happens. Without votes, we just sit there and shake our fist at clouds. So we don't want to exclude those people because they don't agree with us on everything. What we want them to vote Republican. Now, by strange coincidence, I just told you that we had that lightning strike earlier today. And Zoe's topic, my topic to Zoe was, okay, this is the last show we do before the election. It looks like there has been just tectonic shifts towards, the Republicans. Tectonic. Like I've heard like 25% shift in single women, which is not only the Democrats' largest single demographic, but it's also where their true believers are. And what Zoe said, I thought was really, really profound. He said it's not so much a question of them coming to conservatives or Republicans because they want to vote for that. It's that the Democratic Party has gone so far off the rails that they've forced them out. In other words, we're not drawing people. We're just the vote repository for people who cannot bear to vote for what the Democrats are doing anymore. And I think he's absolutely right about that as a general rule. My reply to that was that that this election, and we're recording this on Thursday the 3rd, this election, the midterms in 2022, which will be in just 5 days, I'm not even concerned about the outcome. The candidates that the Republicans are fielding are much, much, much more conservative than they are Republican. And they're also an awful lot more diverse than they used to be. I'm terrible with names a lot of times, and in fact, all the time. But a couple months ago, this Hispanic, I keep saying Hispanic, this is just drilled into my head. Latino, I know that Latinos don't like the term Hispanic, I don't blame them. So this Latino woman, Mexican-American, won a seat in Texas that has not been won by a Republican since the Civil War. And the reason she won the seat was that Mexican Americans are really very traditional in terms of their morality, and so are Black Americans, by the way. They both of those demographics are generally much less tolerant of things like gay marriage and and anything to break up the family, abortion, all those issues. They're actually more conservative than the traditional kind of WASP old school Republican at the yacht club with the navy blue blazer and the cravat. So they're moving because the Democrats are kicking them out. The Democrats are beholden to an ever-shrinking base of ever more extreme people. And this what is a woman thing is the end of them. It's the death of them. This is the hill that progressives are going to die on. And the reason that progressives are going to die on this hill of if you think you're a woman, is because you have managed to now piss off everybody who's not trans. And what's the percentage of trans people? It's a fraction of 1%, certainly. So this is the inevitable result of the cult of victimhood. And the nice thing about trans is you can join the victim club. You may be a white male Christian, heterosexual, but if you change one of those things, your value goes up as a victim. So yeah, so it's a minuscule little thing, but they have to go that way. They chose to go that way. So This is going to be the hill they die on, because this is where Democratic Party politics intersect reality in a way that touches everybody, not just politically. It's one thing to say that, okay, oh, inflation or budget or they're spending money or, whatever. Both parties spent us into this, 30 trillion, 35, $40 trillion hole, whatever it is. But the point is, everybody can connect to the fact that, oh, okay, so my daughter's been, she's been going to practice and working out and running. She's on the track team and she's been giving it everything she has for the last 5 years, and now she gets to come in second or third by 20 seconds because of this insanity. And now when you have a Supreme Court justice who's sitting now, but during her confirmation hearings, it's like, well, since women's rights issues and so on are such a big topic, can you please define what a woman is? And to have her say, well, I'm not a biologist. If I was a voting senator, I would say, look, my job in the Constitution is to advise and consent, right? I'm not, the way I read this, it's not up to me to agree with your ideology. My job is to see whether you're qualified. The president appoints justices. That's how it works. Those are the rules. I would have said, if I'd been one of those senators, I would have said, I'm going to vote against your confirmation, not because I disagree with what you say, but I'm going to vote against you because you are lying to me right now. And we both know it, right? We both know it. When I ask you, can you tell me what a woman is? I know, and you know, that you can. But the politics that you are a part of says that you can't. And if you can't tell me the truth under oath in a Senate confirmation hearing, then that's grounds for me not to support you. It's not a question of whether or not I agree with your views on abortion or trans issues or anything. It's not my job. That the President of the United States appoints the people. Are you qualified, yes or no? And my answer would be, if you can't answer this question, that's a fundamental question, then you're lying to us, to our faces. And so, no, that's the basis that I won't confirm you on. Yeah, Marusha Dark says, are you a woman? It's like, look, this is where the insanity of the progressive movement has reached the wall, right? It doesn't get, this is it. And it helps, although God knows it's painful, it helps to have, some of these TikTok videos out there. I've been watching a lot of Odin's Men lately, who apparently is a Florida Gator. At least he's wearing a Gator hat. Former Marine. He's actually extraordinarily tolerant and fair. But he looks at these TikTok videos and that bleeding edge of crazy is real crazy. Real crazy. And people don't want that crazy. Steve Green's show this week on Right Angle, classic format Right Angle, is that 80% of Americans say the country's out of control. And my response to that was, look, if it was 80% of Americans who said that we are going down the wrong path, that'd be really shocking number. But for 80% to not say, no, we're not going down the wrong path. There is no path. We are out of control. That's a flare, man. That's a flare from a passenger liner that's going down by the bow. And so, we'll see. But to come back to the question, we have to decide what we have to, all of us as individuals, that make up conservatism, have to decide where is the limit, what can we live with new allies, and what can we not live with. That organization that may or may not have existed several years ago here in Los Angeles and elsewhere, the membership requirements were very simple. It was a group for conservatives in Hollywood, but we were crystal clear from the beginning. In order to be a part of this group, you have to there has to be two conditions, just two. You have to be a member of the entertainment industry, and you have to love America. That's it. We don't have any. We don't have any. We're not excluding people because of their position on global warming, abortion. You know, none of it. If you love this country and you're in the entertainment business, then you're in. So I thought that was a good definition, because if they love the country, that's somebody you can talk to. And when I say love the country, I mean love the country as it is and was, not the country that they want it to be when they managed to socialize everything. So I don't think it's so much that there are a bunch of prudes that are like actively excluding young people. I just think that it's badly packaged, and it has been badly packaged. And I think the single greatest problem with the packaging for conservatism, big mistake, and I've been talking about this when I was doing Tea Party events 10 years ago or more. When you walk into a Republican or Tea Party event, there's the Constitution, and it's a big print, and here's Jefferson, and here's an engraving of Franklin, and all this. We're saying that everything we believe in is 250 years old, and it's not. It's in the future, and no wonder young people, well, this is a museum. It's not a museum. It's not a museum, but nevertheless, that's how we present it. But to wrap this up, but as I said, this new group, this slate of 2022 candidates is really different, and while there are many examples, the two that really stand out for me are Ron DeSantis and Carrie Lake, and the reason that Ron DeSantis and Carrie Lake stand out to me is not so much because of their conservative politics, although God knows they're both champions of that. The thing that Ron DeSantis and Carrie Lake have, and I think more and more Republican candidates are starting to have, is they will not walk into their kill box. They just won't even walk into it. I mentioned before when right after Hurricane Ian, DeSantis was getting a question from, it was probably CNN. Governor DeSantis, there's been a lot of criticisms about the Florida's slow response to the Hurricane Ian thing, and he said, whoa, stop right there, just stop. See, this is why people don't trust you. He said that pretty much verbatim. We have not had a slow response to this. You go ask anybody out in the field, and they'll tell you we've had an extraordinarily rapid and thorough and comprehensive response, and we're trying to improve it every day. And he just wouldn't grant the premise, and so. Not only does he get his point across and get more votes, he also embarrasses these buttheads in order and shows them that they're just full of manure. They're just plain lying. When a Republican can get a question that has for the last 50 years put us on the defensive, and doesn't even let him finish the question. Now we are in an entirely new world. Now we're in a world where we are slowly beginning to realize the rules that we've been playing by the whole time. These are the rules. We've been slandered for 40, 50 years, and we know we didn't do it, so we just kind of, I don't know about that. No. Bill does see the YT chat stream, as a matter of fact. He sees them both. He sees everything. So there's that aspect of it. I think the way you get to a big tent is to say to get people. Look, we're going to get a lot of people voting Republican for the first time this election. I think there's no question about that. Large numbers of people voting Republican for the first time. So what does that mean? Well, that means, number one, we cannot be, you guys, you're the guys that voted for Biden or whatever. Well, maybe they are, but let's not forget that we have to find what the news is, and having seen how badly the mainstream media and social media distorts the news, we have to go hunting for the news. There are millions and millions and millions of Americans who don't, because they didn't know, right? That's all they watch is CNN. Who can blame them? They haven't heard any of this stuff. So, look, I voted for Walter Mondale. That was the first vote I cast, and I'm not proud of that at all, but nevertheless, it's the truth. So most, and by the way, I would point out just assuage my own particular sense of shame and filth at having admitted that. Ronald Reagan was the same way. I didn't leave the Democratic Party. Democratic Party left me. Ronald Reagan was a Democrat until he became a Republican. And if it's good enough for Ronald Reagan, then it's probably good enough for just about anybody who's out there right now. Yeah, so Dave Big Booty says, so you're the one. I am the one. So if you see people that you don't agree with 100%, poking around the our headquarters, I don't think it's appropriate to either scare them off because of what mistakes they might have made in the past. They won't know it's a mistake until they see what this is about, and they won't see what this is about until they get a chance to access it. Now, with that said, my experience has been, and my experience in terms of hearing from people who've been on the other end of this, is that virtually every Democrat that actually comes to any kind of a association of Republicans are blown away by how friendly they are and how anti-racist, anti-homophobic, anti-misogynist they are. I did a long series of interviews, and again, forgive me for not remembering the name. No, I did not vote for Dukakis. I mean, everybody has their standards, right? So I've forgotten his name, but he was a major gay writer. He was like editor of a number of like large gay magazines, and he came to the Republican Party, and he said he got nothing but love, and the people who he thought he was friends with on the old team, they were the ones who were calling him a sellout, and all these homophobic names. They were the ones who were giving him all this hate. He said the conservatives, I couldn't believe how nice they were. And I've heard it again and again and again and again and again. I've heard it from blacks, I've heard it from Hispanics, I've heard it from Latinos, I've heard it from gays, heard again and again and again. Yeah, Dave Rubin, great example. That when people finally get past what they've been told about us, then they're just astonished. And furthermore, they're not only astonished and pleased at the new company, they slowly begin to realize, my God, I was lied to about a lot of things, wasn't I? Because I've been told these are evil people. They're the nicest people I ever met. And in that interview, I'm so sorry I can't remember his name, but that's not unusual for me. I'll never forget this. There are some moments in the course of my career that I'll just never forget, and this was one of them. He was talking about the kind of reception, and I said, what's the worst thing? This is a lifelong far-left Democrat, gay man, and not just a gay man, a standard bearer for the gay movement. Said, what's the worst thing that a conservative or a Republican has ever said to you? Have you ever had anybody say anything negative? He said, well, yeah, kind of, I guess. And I thought, oh boy, here we go. I'm not going to enjoy this. And this is pretty much verbatim what he said. He said, I was at some event or something, and I was talking about what it was like, to be a gay person who's leaving the Democratic Party and coming to the Republicans. And after this event was over, this real traditional kind of person walked up to me and said, hey, look at that. We just got rated again, I think. Hey, welcome. If you're here new, you're getting a dose of astonishment and super wisdom. We're talking about how the Republican Party can be more acceptable for young people. So stick around for that anyway, and then when you get boring, you just take off. So anyway, I was telling the story just before this giant influx came in. I was interviewing a man who was the editor of gay magazines. He was like a super spokesman for the gay movement, lifelong Democrat, became a Republican. And I asked him, what was the worst thing that a conservative ever said to you, or a Republican? And he said, oh, that's easy. I was at an event. I was speaking, and after it was over, this very conservative, traditionally dressed man came over and said, I have to tell you that the Bible tells me that I cannot agree with your lifestyle, but it's the lifestyle that I have the problem with. You seem like a lovely person. I just want you to know, that we're praying for you and welcome to the club. And I said, that's the worst thing anybody said to you? And he said, yeah. He basically said, the worst thing that a conservative ever said to me was nicer than the best thing that a progressive ever said to me when he announced he's changing teams. So, that's what happens when you strip off the jersey, man. It's like you don't know what you're getting. So we're going to get a lot of people voting Republican for the first time ever, and we need to make sure that they feel welcome here and that they understand the reality that they've been lied to about us from the beginning. Yeah, Marisha Dark, hate the sin, love the sinner. Exactly. That's how I would like to look at things. And if somebody comes in with a different opinion on global warming or a different opinion but in any event, if they're voting to stop the destruction of the values of this country, and that's what we need. So that's what I would say about that first question for Stressful to answer to the degree that I can get to answer them. All right, here we go. So let's see what's in the peanut gallery. Okay, it's a new thread. Okay, so it looks like a new thread. Let's see what we got here. To put on my cogitations. What did I just do? Oh. Anybody there? Hey, hello. Huh. I bet it is. That may have been just a regular up, or can we allow him to say that? Maybe. All right, so yeah. What do you think that the USAF or USSF, United States Air Force, United States Space Force, space plane was doing up there? The one that looks like a baby shuttle with no windows. Any speculation? And knowing what you know about space physics, was it a hunter robot which could somehow go from satellite to kill them? In Road Rider for the win. In other words, was it there to protect us from the terrible secret of space? If you haven't seen the terrible secret of space, it's from the old days of Something Awful, and Lotax wrote a long thread about the terrible secret of space, and there's a video out there called "The Terrible Secret of Space," and I just love it. Okay, so the vehicle in question is what is it? It's the X-37, the X-34, it's X something or other. It is, in fact, looks exactly like a small unmanned shovel shuttle. I think it's the X-37. Nope. Well, maybe. Yes. How about that? Got it right. Yeah, the Boeing X-37. It is a small winged thing. It's called the Orbital Test Vehicle, reusable robotic spacecraft, and of course, it has to be small enough to fit into the launch fairing on the front of the thing. Okay, what is it there for? Well, I can tell you what I know about what it's there for. It's there because it is a reconnaissance platform, and that reconnaissance platform is capable of long duration missions, and it has enough thrust on it to be able to make significant changes to its orbit. That's what you want. Having just finished the Cold War thing we talked about in my favorite episode, which is called Cloak and Daggers. In the beginning of it wasn't the beginning of the Cold War, but somewhere in the early '60s. So we developed the U-2 spy plane, right? And it flies high, but not fast. In fact, it flies real slow. There's a quote from the Cold War What We Saw series. There's a guy who was a pilot on the U-2 missions, and the U-2 missions would sometimes fly at a ground speed of about 120 miles an hour, real slow, and they're flying deep over Soviet territory. And this one U-2 pilot was talking about how he was on a 10-hour mission in this tiny little cockpit the size of a bubble, and somebody said, "Well, what's that like?" And he said, "Well, to be honest with you, I ran out of ass before I ran out of gas." And I know that feeling from having driven long distances in 1970s era automobiles. Anyway, so the U-2 high, but not fast, and then they shot down Francis Gary Powers, shot down a couple more. So then we still need reconnaissance, Yeah, the Glomar Explorer. It's the same. It's the same. It's the same episode. So we need something. We we're working on Project Corona, which is reconnaissance satellites, and they're on a Thor booster with an Agena top stage, and I go through every one of the 12 failures that it had before they finally got one, right? But even when it was successful, the early Corona project satellites, television was so primitive that a TV image would do you no good at all. So the first reconnaissance satellites would fly over the Soviet Union, snap their pictures, and then they would eject this little box, and this thing would re-enter the atmosphere, and then it pop a parachute, and probably a C-130 with what looks like giant whiskers in front of it would swing along and catch the thing in midair, and then you take it back and you develop the footage from this orbital surveillance. That's what orbital reconnaissance had to be in the beginning. Okay, so somebody says my audio is effing up, and I would reply to that. It's not my audio, it's YouTube's audio. So we thought we would be safe if we flew high enough, but we didn't. So we lost the U-2s. The satellites are not ready yet. We're having a problem getting them into orbit, number one. And number two, you've got to recover the film. And so satellite imagery, satellite reconnaissance isn't quite there. We need something to fill the gap. So the U-2 was probably built, I want to say, in the very late 50s. And, real orbital satellites probably didn't happen until late 60s. So what do you do for the mid-60s? Well, you go to the same guy who built the U-2 and you say, hey, Kelly Johnson, we're getting shot down on the U-2. We want something that is, their SAMs are getting better, surface to air missiles are getting better, so we need something else. And Kelly Johnson says, look, I'm not going to do a U-2B. I'm not going to do a new version of the U-2. If we're going to do something, I want something that's not going to last for a year or be obsolete by the time we built it. That's practically a direct quote. Kelly Johnson says, I don't want something that's going to be obsolete by the time we build it. I want something that's going to last for a decade. I want something that's going to set some records going to last for a decade. Well, it turns out he built something that set records that didn't last for a decade. They lasted for 40 years and counting. So he built the, everybody thinks it's the SR-71. SR-71 is a later derivative. He built the A-12 ox cart, single-seater, not a two-seater like the SR-71. The chines are a little more compact. It's lighter, and it's faster. The SR-71 has been said to go as high as 85,000 feet, but there are reports that the A-12 ox cart could get to 95,000. And plus, it was a stealthy design because it was so smoothly contoured. So all of a sudden, instead of a U-2 flying at 65, 70,000 feet at 100 knots, now we got something flying at 85,000, 90,000 feet at Mach 3 plus. Nobody's able to have a definitive answer, but it's generally agreed that in excess of 1,000 SAMs were launched at the A-12 SR-71s, and never even got close. The Ox had such a small radar cross section that most ground-based radars couldn't see it until it was overhead. And obviously, if you only see it by the time it's overhead and it's moving at Mach 3, the Ox at altitude could outrun most missiles that were just outrun them, not outmaneuver them, just outrun them. So anyway. So the Ox really changed it while we were waiting for these surveillance satellites. So back to your question about the X-37. When I was doing the research on that and talking about the evolution of reconnaissance satellites, because that episode, Cloaks and Daggers, is about spying, it's about image, it's about intelligence, SIGINT and human. And thank you for that, James. That was James Penn. It was very nice of you. So. Yeah, 60 years, not 40 years. I don't know what I was thinking. So, one of the things that I discovered was that the Project Corona eventually turned into, would launch KH satellites, KH-11, KH-12. I think there might be a 13. There's speculation that there's a KH-14. So the KH-11 is the Hubble Space Telescope. As a matter of fact, there's pretty compelling evidence that the reason we have a Hubble Space Telescope is because we had a somewhat obsolete reconnaissance satellite, and we just kind of repurposed it. But if you look at the KH-11s, And these surveillance satellites, they're the size of the Hubble. They're huge. And that telescope points down instead of points up. And now we just beam the images down. And from several sources, I've heard that we can read license plates from orbit with no problem. And GRR2 gifted, a National Reconnaissance Orbit gifted it to NASA. There you go. The Hubble twins. I didn't know there was a twin. What happened to the other one? How about that? I did not know that. So, so I've heard repeatedly that we can read license plates, and I have heard anecdotally from two people who would know that on a good day we can tell the time on somebody's watch, right? So that's pretty cool. Now here's the problem. My understanding is that the latest generation of these satellites are essentially stealth satellites, unconfirmed. I don't know, but the advantage to a satellite is, you can't shoot it down without essentially going to war, because now you've got all this debris. That's the end of space travel. But essentially, yeah, it's great. You can get whatever images you want to. But the problem with satellites is they are in orbit, and that means they're predictable to the hundredth of a second, right? We know exactly when this thing's going to be overhead. And if the enemy knows when the camera's going to be overhead, then they stop doing what they're doing while that thing flies over. So the real advantage to having a space-based observation platform like the X-37 is, can you change the orbit? Do you have enough delta V? Do you have enough thrust over time to significantly change the orbit? Because if you can change the orbit, now you can go over places you couldn't go over before, and you can go over the places you were going over before at different times. And that is it. I suspect that's what the X-37 is for. I know that on at least one mission, it was up there for at least 6 months. My guess would be that it is a reconnaissance platform that has the ability to do an awful lot of delta V, change its orbit a lot. It's also just barely possible. Rich, I haven't read Blind Man's Bluff, but I know it very well, and I certainly know the tactics very well, submarine tactics. So that is the most likely case. There is another possibility that I've just heard once, certainly nobody ever told me it was classified. I just heard somebody speculating on it. But it sounds like it's something that could be done and would be cool to do. There is some discussion that there is a ground-based system that can put out essentially like a tennis net, pretty much straight up, and anything that flies through that is going to have its electronics cooked. Hang on a second. I just have to make sure everything's groovy and cool here. Okay, great. And so it's possible that the X-37 is actually not so much trying to do the same stuff as the orbital reconnaissance satellites. It's possible that what the X-37 is doing is it's testing signal strength, right? That's another possibility in any event. All right, so that'll do it for that question, I think. And thanks for it, because I love this kind of stuff. Moving on. Cody Fett. Hello, Bill. I'm probably not going to be able to hear this question live since I've started a new job this week. First time in years. Congratulations, Cody. I really mean that. I know that feeling. I've been out of work long enough to think I'll probably never work again, and it's miserable. But I still wanted to send in one of the questions I've been building up to ask you since 2009. So without further ado, here's one of the more controversial ones. Okay. This may be the question we addressed earlier. Similar to. It's become clear, sadly, over the course of this year that conservatives have their own brand of NPCs that, while distinct, shares many of the same qualities as their progressive counterparts. That distinctive comes from how, while the progressive NPC goes with whatever the current thing is, the conservative NPC will instantly reject the current thing no matter its content. Yeah, this is exactly what we talked about earlier. And this is exactly what I was talking about when I said we've been under attack for so long that we start getting trigger happy, and we automatically think anything they say is a lie. And if they said, if they said that, it's raining outside, and it is raining outside, we'd say it's clear. That's not good. This presents two problems. The first is that it rejects the possibility of the current thing being correct for once. Amen. And the second is that it utterly ignores the possibility that something they like might become the current thing. The very fact that we have a phrase like Red Scare means at some point in the past, conservative topics became the current thing. And there's a two, for example, because as you know, the communists were really infiltrating American society. However, I know this is a controversial because people are going to take it as an insult, but I do not intend it that way. What I intend is to get to people examine themselves and what they're saying so that we don't get so caught up in our own pride that we miss something critical. Push away possible allies or do something just plain stupid. You've called this process mental hygiene before, so you're clearly not averse to the idea, and perhaps you can flesh it out in a way that I can't. So what do you think of this, Bill? I'm sorry it's so long, but I had to trim it down. Well, by happy coincidence, Cody, the first hour of the show was about exactly that. Well, the second half hour anyway was about exactly that, about how we are now about to get a bunch of people voting Republican, probably for the first time in their lives, and we need to understand that Ronald Reagan started out as a Democrat, I started out as a Democrat, and to welcome newcomers who are very tentative. They're not coming to the Republicans because they like Republicans. They're coming to the Republicans because the Democrats have forced them out. That's a completely different story. It's much weaker glue. So now we have a chance to welcome in a bunch of people who are voting Republican, and if we welcome them and we disagree with them in a civil manner, then that will actually make them more fond of us. If, on the other hand, we start getting into that, oh, so you believe in global warming thing, or then okay, great. We'll be solid gold, 100% pure conservatives, and we'll sit in our caves or our cabins and watch the country fall apart because we didn't have the votes. So, yeah, I don't think anybody should. Needless to say, I don't think anybody should give up their own morals. But if somebody's thinking about joining the team, and since joining the team it's not a question of talent, right? You're just dealing with raw numbers here. If a Democrat doesn't vote for the Democrats, that's a -1. But if that same person not only doesn't vote for the Democrats but also votes for Republican, it's -2 for them. So yeah, so let's do it. I hope I answered it earlier. I think so. The Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope is one of the Hubble twins, and it's not launched yet. Correct, right? I didn't know that there was a twin. I wonder what it's going to do. It's going to certainly, at the very least. Oh, there you go. I haven't heard the Big House before ever, but that is in the Twitch stream. That is maybe the best thing I've heard in months, if not years. The Big House says, stick to your values, not to your interests. Your interest is getting your values in place. And as long as you don't violate your values, then anything that you can do to make these people feel comfortable and welcome, even if you don't agree with them on everything, even in fact, if you disagree with them on maybe even most stuff, that's not important. What matters is that they are making a decision to vote R, and they deserve the time to learn the things that we all learned. Some of us are lucky enough to have grown up this way. I wasn't. They're going to have an entire universe of, oh, what? You guys aren't Nazis? No, we're not. We're not. And you don't hate me for being, no, we don't. Half of us the same way. You got to really be doing it. So the purist Republican is like the left side. Yeah, Political Animal says the purist Republican. And I only get with that because I've had a number of people who are more conservative than thou. And as I've said, I've been saying this for 10 years. The one thing that makes me want to hang up my spurs is when somebody says, I've been following you for 12 years and just supported you, and then you said something I disagree with, and now you're dead to me. Okay, all right. On the road, speaking live, I have said that when you get down to it, every single one of us is a political party of one. There's not, I suppose, given the limited number of issues and the number of people, but essentially, there's nobody out there who agrees with me on every single thing that I think, right? It's just a question of, do I agree mostly with you or mostly with you? And now we're getting an enormous shift coming, and I say, let's not let's not screw it up. Give them the benefit of the doubt if they've decided to, cross the line, and make them welcome. That's how you win friends and influence people, and that's what we want to do. We want to win friends and influence people. All right, here we go. Joe R. Hi, Bill. Thank you for getting my question. I always appreciate it when you do. Thank you for asking it, Joe. And I know there have been many times when the forum at billwhittle.com has been a lonely and dry, dusty prairie with nothing but the sounds of tumbleweeds. Just so I'm happy to do that. Hey, thank you very much for that too, Scorch 191. There's some very kind things here. Um, we and I'll get back to this. And Brendan Allen on YouTube says, "Can I discuss more about the video for the Cold War?" I can't actually. They asked me to keep it, relatively under wraps. I haven't revealed anything that's not already on the podcast, but they wouldn't let me put out pictures of the set, for example, because I thought the set was great. And please do a video for America's Forgotten Heroes. That has already been that's a done deal. That's going to happen. And that one we may be able to really open up. Okay, so back to this. Thank you, Jeremy. Love you too. You guys are great. So let's go back to the question here. Midterm elections are less than a week away, and as I write this, it's looking pretty fantastic for us. However, there are reports of early voting and mail-in ballots breaking records in the Democrats' favor, although their early voting lead is significantly less than it was in 2020. What are the chances of another 2020 happening this election cycle in the wee hours of the morning, and then with ballot counting continuing for over a week until they get the result they want? I think this will happen, but maybe not as blatant as 2020, but it still has consequences nonetheless. There are already reports of problems in Pennsylvania where 250,000 mail-in ballots were sent to undisclosed or unverified people or locations. Imagine my shock. I watch the statewide races closely, and I'm seeing good signs for us. We will likely win Senate seats in Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, Pennsylvania, and shockingly, as of now, it looks like we possibly take a Senate seat in New Hampshire, maybe even Washington State. Have you seen the polls in New York? Lee Zeldin leads Kathy Hochul by a point in some polls and may pull off an upset victory. Yes. Republicans need this upstate vote, the Long Island vote, at least 30% of the New York City vote in order to flip the state. And as I write this, Lee Zeldin has 37% support in the city, according to polls. Zeldin crushed Hochul in the debate, and as all the rest of the Republican candidates did all across the country. Yeah, especially with Fetterman, that was just painful. I mean, seriously, we'll just talk about that for a minute when I get through this. Am I being overly optimistic and unrealistic? Stranger things have happened. 55 Senate seats and a Republican New York governor should be enough to snap people out of their woke stupor. As I write this, the betting odds have their R's taken the Senate at a 68% chance of 53-47 and the House at 88% chance at greater than 50-seat gain. Yes. P.S. Carrie Lake is amazing. Yes, I've talked about her already during the show. I couldn't agree more. She will be the next Arizona governor. I think so. She's a rising star in the GOP. Unless Arizona cheats again, God bless Joe. Thank you, Joe. Lots and lots and lots and lots of interesting stuff there. So the immediate question is, will they be able to cheat their way out of 2022 the way they cheated their way out of 2020? Let's just take a specific example to make the case for why I don't think they will be able to. Again, I think that November 2020 was a sneak attack on the country, and it caught us as much by surprise as 9/11 or Pearl Harbor did. That's the benefit of a sneak attack, is you don't know it's coming. It's just a sucker punch. You just said la la la, boom, and down you go, right? And by the time you get up, it's over, right? By the time you react, it's done. And that's what I think happened in 2020. So let's just take a concrete example, right? Regular viewers of the show will remember I seem to be incapable of remembering whether that large county center in Atlanta was either the All-State Arena or the State Farm Arena. I want to say it was the State Farm Arena, but in any event, we know the one we're talking about. So let's take that as an example of why I think this could be different. So long before that video came out, during the night of the election, we're watching the results come in, starting to look really, really good. Florida's in hard for Trump. Trump's looking good everywhere. And then the first news that I can remember hearing about irregularities was, why haven't they called Georgia yet? First time chat from Bird Game Bot. Thank you, Bird Game Bot. Okay, so the first irregularity I can remember on the night of the election was, why haven't they called Georgia yet? Well, they haven't called Georgia because a key voting district is late reporting their votes. Really? Yeah, it's a one of the biggest counting centers in Atlanta, and they're not reporting their votes. Why not? Well, they say there's a broken water main there, and so the building is flooded, so they have to kind of get the ballots up above water, and maybe just a couple hours or so before we get the final vote in. Okay. That's the first thing I heard, and then Arizona gets called for Biden with 4% of the vote in, or 5%. That wasn't right. And then the next thing you know is that, counting has been suspended in the 5 or 6 states, I can't remember now, I blocked it out, that Biden needed to win and that Trump was winning in handily, but we've stopped counting that night. And we'll start counting in the morning. And all of us are thinking, okay, this is what a sneak attack is, right? And this is the absolute truth, without embellishment. On the morning of 9/11, my friend Fritz called me and said, turn on the TV, woke me up. I said, what channel? He said, doesn't matter what channel. Okay. And when I turned on the TV on September 11th, 2001, I came into the story when the first tower had gone down, but the second tower was still standing. So the first image I see is an image of a helicopter, lots of dust in the air, flying around the World Trade Center. And I swear to God, I'm not making it. This is what cognitive dissonance really is that I remember saying to myself, isn't that weird? I thought that there were 2 towers. I thought they were twin towers. Obviously, I'm wrong because there's just one tower there. I couldn't process it. I didn't see it go down. And seeing the World Trade Center without the other one is like, I must have been wrong about there being 2 World Trade Centers buildings, because there's only one, and buildings don't just disappear. That's what cognitive dissonance does. And that's what happened to us on election night. We were like, what? That's what happened on Pearl Harbor. These guys are looking around. They did what? Yeah, all these bodies in the water and these burning ships, and all the people that have been gunned down on the streets. What happened? What hit us? That's what a sneak attack does. So the radar operators at Pearl Harbor, radar is really quite new invention at the time, saw the incoming Japanese strike. They were expecting a flight of B-17s to come in. B-17 is a big airplane, so they just assumed that what they were seeing was the flight of B-17s. And that was what they assumed on December 7th. But the thing I can tell you with certainty is that from December 8th until the end of the war, there were no radar blips that went unreported at Pearl Harbor. We all understand what I'm saying, right? So after you're down there looking at all these wreckage and all these dead, now you see something on the radar screen that doesn't make sense, you are going to ring every alarm bell possible. So back to the example of State Farm or Allstate. So we're going to stop counting. So then they showed us the video out of the place, right? And there are the little group of observers, Republicans and Democrats, and and somebody, there was no sound, but look, got a real problem on something, was this, we gotta do something, blah 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 blah. And so you see the observers kind of like milling around, and then they're just sort of slowly herded out the door. Democrats and Republicans herded out the door, and then the doors are closed, and then a little bit of time goes by, and then they start pulling these giant, plastic tubs of votes out from underneath the table. Hello, Argentina. It's good to hear you. And then they start counting them again. Now, if at that location on this coming Tuesday, they say, you know what? It looks like we got another problem. We're going to have to stop counting. If you think those Republicans are going to go away, no. No. They will not go away. They will not. We are now alert to that problem in the way that we became alert to the fact that you could use commercial jets as cruise missiles, or that you could launch a strike on the U.S. fleet. You get one sneak attack from any particular vector. And so I think it's going to be much harder for them to pull that off. Furthermore, I think the morale is extremely low. Um, Despite what Joe puts in the thing here about early voter turnout, the word I'm hearing from California going out to Democrats is we're looking at one of the lowest voter turnouts in history for California. That's what they're saying. Um, I have never seen our side more motivated. I'm more motivated this election than I was last election. I was plenty motivated that election, but after the inauguration of what's his name, I remember thinking, I cannot wait till 2022, right? I cannot wait till 2022. Um, and not only have conservatives been waiting for Republicans waiting for this moment for 2 years, like every day. Not only that, but in those intervening 2 years, so much has gone to hell that large numbers of people who voted for Biden are thinking, "What the hell is this?" We were told he's this moderate, nice guy, and he's a cranky, bitter guy who doesn't know what day it is. Doesn't know. Yeah, LOL, 80 million. Of course not. Of course he didn't get 80 million votes. Of course not. That's behind us now. So I think that because of those two factors, number one, it's not going to be as easy to cheat as it was before. Number two, three reasons. If we see irregularities, it will not be a gobsmack situation like it was on 2 years ago. It won't leave us like, well, I guess that's kind of weird, but all right. So because we just couldn't believe it, just couldn't accept it, right? Just couldn't accept it. And again, I'm looking forward to going back to Daily Wire. I admire them all enormously. Ben said when Trump said there's something wrong, Ben said there's absolutely no evidence of that. And I said the evidence is that they stopped counting. And even I wasn't. I mean, I had no idea what was going on, and it took days to sink in. But I think they're going to get shellacked, and I mean historically shellacked. And so yes, of course they'll try to cheat. Of course they will. Um, I just don't. Number one, I don't think we'll be as asleep as we were, and number two, more importantly, I think the margin of victory is going to be much. I think the margin of victory is going to be larger than the margin of fraud can be. Now, with that said, what do we do if things go the way it looks like we're going to go? Hey, a political animal says there's 4 Falcon Heavy launches for 2023. I can't wait. So let me just stay with this for a second. Um, so let's assume that we get these numbers that he's talking about, at least 50 seats in the House and a 53-47 Senate. So we don't have a supermajority. It doesn't mean we can. It doesn't mean we can pass laws over a veto. But there are a couple things we could do that we don't do it, that we really don't deserve to be living in this country. Um, the two things, the first thing I'm going to do when I come back after I get back is I say I'm going to, we all know what that means. My intention at the time as I sit here is to record a firewall called 2 out of 3 ain't bad. And so, and then look at what does 2 out of 3 give you? What can you do with the House and the Senate that you couldn't do before? If you have just the House, there are some things you can do. If you have the House and the Senate, then there is a wider set of things you can do. If you got all three, you can do anything. So what can you do with 2 out of 3? Well, the two things that come to mind are, number one, you can launch special prosecutors and launch congressional inquiries into voting irregularities and any number of other criminal activities, right? So you have the ability to do that. You have the ability to do what the press should be doing and isn't doing. You have the ability to get to the bottom of things. And in this respect, I am highly encouraged by people like Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley and Senator Cotton, who don't seem willing to sit down and just take it, among others, right? I've watched them talking to Zuckerberg, and I've watched them talking to a lot of these people, and Josh especially is like, I just don't think it could be better done. Josh is just, he's perfect. He's perfect. He's calm. He's composed. He's eloquent. He's just an attractive looking guy who is under control. He reminds me of Mr. Smith. He reminds me of Jimmy Stewart in that regard. But he won't let them go. He won't let them go. And he sets them up for this. Well, it's funny you say that because you just testified you didn't do this, but right here when you testified 4 months ago, you said this, and this. So which one is it? He's doing it like a lawyer, and that's how you need to do it. So, okay. So number one, you can launch congressional inquiries into this. I mentioned before, and this is where I'm going to be going hard with this, if things go the way it looks like they're going to go. I think the single greatest strategy that you can do when you have 2 out of 3 is you can send legislation to the president to be vetoed, right? It's going to be vetoed. There's nothing we can do about that. But what you can do is you can construct the legislation in such a way, and you can name it in such a way that by vetoing the legislation, you paint them into a corner, right? For example, yeah, and you can impeach Biden, you can do all that stuff. Absolutely. Yeah, let's just do it every week, whatever. By the way, oh wait, to impeach in the Senate, to vote to expel in the Senate, that's a 2/3 vote, right? In the Senate, is that what it is? I don't remember. I don't think it's just a simple minority. So I don't think we can actually accomplish that. But sure, send the articles of impeachment. Yeah, send them, whatever. You want to make this thing into a political circus, Pelosi? Fair enough. We could do that too. Anyway, what I would do is I would put together legislation like and I would call it like the Fair Play for Our Daughters Act, something like that, right? And the legislation would be, we're not in any way intending to take away the civil rights or the basic dignity of people who are transsexual. That's not the purpose of this. The purpose of this is to say that there are, from birth, biological differences between men and women, and that those differences, it's not just a question of your testosterone levels, it's a question of the mechanical advantage of having, 45-inch, shoulders, So, and the physical construction of your hips. These are not things that you can medicate away. And so the Defend Our Daughters Act of 2023 is basically saying that we find it to be unfair to the young women who are engaged in athletics in this country, for them to be competing against males who claim to be females. Whether they've had the surgery or not, whether they've had the hormones or not, it doesn't matter. It's not fair, and everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. Send the Fair Play for Our Daughters Act to Joe Biden and make him veto it, and then keep doing that kind of thing, right? Just keep doing that kind of thing, right? The Reasonable Energy Plan for America bill, send that to be vetoed, right? And construct these bills in such a way so that you don't give them anything that they can use against it. So, for example, if I were going to write the Sensible Energy Plan for America, I would talk about ways that we could increase our solar and wind power, along with whatever else we need. And whatever else we need is nuclear power plants and oil pipelines and all of that. But don't give them the opportunity to say, oh, see, they're against the green energy thing. They're in the pocket of big oil or whatever. No. We're calling for the expansion of solar and wind. It'd be idiotic not to gather energy that's just out there for free, and just don't give them the ammunition. Kick them in the nuts and don't stop, and make them veto. Make him veto bills that not only have rational sounding names, but that are such common sense fair issues that if somebody vetoes it, they make them reveal their hand. That's what I'm saying, right? Send out bills and make them reveal their hand, because they have to either veto them. If they let them pass, then they fall apart. Just do it. Yeah, there you go. Marusha Dark's got a great one. You could have the House draft, the Senate, reconciliation. You could deliver to the president's desk the Stop Sniffing Children's Hair Act. Make him veto it, right? That's how you do it. That's how you do it. And Mobile Moda says make a 25th Amendment inquest. I think that's absolutely, completely fair. Invoke the 25th Amendment, right? Say, this is not a political test. We're not asking for an ideological purity test. We're simply saying that the person who is the most powerful man in the world should be able to remember what day of the week it is. We are asking for the president to take the long existing, non-political, whatever that, what's that, that thing of this latest psychiatric, they keep updating it, the something version 6, whatever, right? Say, look, no, this is something that has been approved for cognitive evaluation for decades, right? Make him take it. And that would give you a chance to point out that the previous president not only took it, but flew through it, aced it. Trump was challenged on it. Yeah, sure, of course. And why would you have a problem with that, right? We're not asking you to, the DSM, thank you. We're not asking you, Miss Winnie, thanks. We're not asking you to recite the Constitution. It'd be nice if you could. It'd be nice if you understood at least that. We're asking you if you can tell us what day it is today. We're going to do simple, here's a series of numbers, just read them back to me, that kind of thing. Make them do it. And then that's that. Now, as far as legislative agenda goes, there's only one thing that matters to me in this election, and it's not even the border, and it's not even big tech, because I think Elon has maybe cracked that for us. The only thing that this Congress has to do, there's only one thing this Congress has to do, and that is get the election system back to accountability. That's it, and that's all. If they do just that, then they will have saved the country. And if they don't do that, then we have no one to blame but ourselves. That is it, right? And phrase it in such a way that they simply look idiotic arguing the point. I'll give you a great example of this. A YouTuber, young guy, went to, I guess it was UCLA, it might have been Berkeley, and he interviews a bunch of these students, and he says, do you think that requiring an ID to vote is somehow voter suppression? And every one of these white college kids said, yes, absolutely it is. It's unfair to poor people, it's unfair to black people, and gave all these reasons why having an ID to vote was racist Nazi behavior, right? And disenfranchising people. Here's the part about this where this gets brilliant. Then the guy, same guy, goes into a black neighborhood and asks 10 black people, do you think that you should be required to have an ID in order to vote? And every one of them says, well, of course. And then the guy, just to put the stake through the heart of this thing, then the guy says, well, there are a lot of white college kids who said that black people aren't capable of getting IDs. And then you watch the reaction of the black people, and they're saying things like, what? And then they, really? Yeah, they're saying that blacks can't get IDs. And these black Americans are looking at the guy like, how do they expect me to fly on an airplane? How do they expect me to buy alcohol at the supermarket? And then you got him, right? Then you got him. Well, see, ma'am, the thing is that these progressives think you're so stupid and so incapable of acting for yourself that progressives think that you're not capable of getting an ID, and progressives think that black people don't fly on airplanes. And they also think that black people don't buy a nice bottle of wine to have at dinner at a supermarket. That's why we're having this discussion. Boom, boom. Put them on the defensive morally. That's the plan. Put them on, make them defend these policies and structure it in such a way that for once, they walk into our kill box and not the other way around. Just prepare the battle space, right? We got all our artillery zeroed in. We got our machine guns in place. We're going to put out a lot of enfilading fire. We got our claymores. We're let them walk to us for once, right? Let them take the bait for once. Let them take the bait for once, and make them say it. Then the counterpoint, boom, hit them with this. Oh, so black people don't think that it's unreasonable to need an ID. The only people who are saying that black people can't get an ID are white millionaires. you racist bastards. That's number one. That's the punch. And then the counterpunch is voter fraud is voter suppression. Voter fraud is voter suppression. If I vote and I'm legally allowed to vote and somebody casts a vote opposite of mine and they're not legally able to vote, then that person has stolen my vote. They've stolen my vote. Boom. Get on top of it and never, ever, 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 ever let them have the moral high ground because they don't own it and we've just walked away from it. Do what DeSantis is doing and what Lake is doing. Get right in their faces and say, listen, this is why nobody trusts you and this is why nobody likes you. Right? This is why nobody likes you. You're the racists. You're the ones who are saying black people are not capable of getting an ID. What planet do you live on? Oh, we already know what planet you live on. You live on planet Berkeley. Well, here's some newsflash for you, right? If you go out and actually talk to black people, the ones that you are deigning, that you are, the ones that you're protesting your white supremacy about as you exercise your white supremacy, go and talk to them and they will tell you, well, of course we have IDs. And of course it's not unreasonable. Punch them right in the morality and don't ever stop, period. Boom. But when we come out of it, I want an election system. I swear to God, I mean this from the bottom of my heart. This is not exaggeration. I want paper ballots in every state that are voted on election day, which becomes a national holiday. So there's none of this. I couldn't get off of work. Poor. Nope. It's a legal national holiday. You're already legally allowed to, but make it a national holiday once every 2 years. Congratulations, it's election day. Okay, great. And I want you to go down paper ballot that is kept forever because it's not that much space and it's not that expensive. Kept forever. So anybody, Republicans, Democrats, anybody can go back and count these things again with a suitable adult there so that they don't burn the ones they don't like, right? And I want the purple finger. I want the purple finger. I don't want a little sticker that they can hand out by the millions or that I can switch. I want a purple finger. You have to go down to the polling place and you have to dip your finger in ink and you have to have a purple finger to say that you voted, just as in any other third world country where their election systems are utterly corrupt. That's where we are now, right? That's where we are now. So that's what I want. I want the purple finger to be the badge of pride, and if we can do that, then we got a real good chance of restoring this old girl. All right, moving on. Jeffrey Adams, Bill, are the transcripts of your Apollo, Heroes, and other remarkable docuseries available anywhere? Your writing is so clear yet captivating. I'd like to study and share them with others. Thank you very much, Jeffrey. We talked about this quite a bit at the top, so just to add and just to address the written issue, it is a work for hire that is owned by Daily Wire, and I am grateful to have been offered the chance. I'm very proud of it, and and I've been paid for it. So whether or not they will make a written transcript available is up to them, but I will certainly mention it. I think it's good for Daily Wire, and it's good for me too. And it's very kind of you to say. We did, as I mentioned earlier, we had to use an audio transcript, which I'm sure was an automatic transcription thing, which gets you probably 90% of the way. But there's still some errors. If you record this thing and then run it through one of these, there's lots of software that'll do it for you. But ideally, I'd like to see it released as a book or a study guide or something like that, because I'm very proud of it, and thank you. Oh, there you go. King of Cleans, clever, in caps, is shouting at us now from Twitch, and thank you for this. I can still get the old Cold War series on Apple Podcasts. Yes, and I think you can get all of them on Apple Podcasts. And I don't know what they cost, but I don't think they're too expensive. And, this is the world we live in. It costs money to produce them, and it costs money to listen to them. And it's not an unreasonable price, and I'm very, very proud of it. So anyway, hopefully that'll do it. Yep, there's a link. So there's a link to America's Forgotten Heroes, which I will now copy and put into the chat for YouTube. Hang on, because it's in the Twitch. I think this will do it. Copy, and then I have to, it opens up a separate browser. Hang on a second. Hang on, kids. I'll just put the link in YouTube as well. Hopefully. Boom. Bam. There it is. Okay, so this is actually working really well. This dual streaming thing. I'm real happy with how this is turning out. Let me get back to Twitch so I can watch it. All right. Yeah, we still got some time. Okay, on to Chris Taylor. Bill, your undeserved decline in YouTube view counts remind me of the Spinal Tap problem. You're not less popular, but rather your appeal is becoming more selective. As I recall, at the end of that movie, when all seems to be falling apart, one of the band's songs goes to number one in Japan. When you pull away from day to day politics, a lot of what you talk about is universal human nature and aspirations. Have you put any effort into marketing your work overseas or on overseas video platforms like Niconico or Daily Motion? Keep up the great work. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for the compliment. To be honest with you, Chris, I don't think I've done much work to try and promote this thing in this country. Part of that is, most of that is lack of experience and resources. And please don't misunderstand this. It's not a lack of interest in getting them seen. That's my number one priority. But the mechanics of marketing, doing the marketing on my own, is one of those things that just reaches the disc full error kind of thing. We talked at the top of the show about how if we go with this new format for right angles, that will mean that plenty of outlets for me to do live commentary on the political issues of the day, and then I'd go back to writing hopefully a segment a week, right? A firewall or something a week, something produced, and something that's not ephemeral, something that's not about the news stories of the day. It's kind of what Moving Back to America was. Trying to just get the fingers going, and then do you know, maybe these things will look kind of like the Virginia class subs compared to the Seawolf class subs. You know, every now and then I'm sure there'll be something to light me up enough to really dig in deep, but you know, lighter, faster version of that with the same feel and hopefully the same kind of timelessness. So that's the plan anyway. Right now, as I said, I'm under a tremendous writing burden for this new series, and I'm behind on that schedule-wise. So I'm working on that as well. But nevertheless, it is certainly where we need to go. And yeah, and I'm embarrassed about how poorly done it's been so far. Hang on. CP Tome says Mark Melville's Long Easy was flown to EAA Museum this week by Mark Zeitlin. Brought a tear, no longer going to see Mike and Sally in their Long Easy at AirVenture. Mark Zeitlin is the guy who did all of the maintenance work on my Long Easy. He's a great guy. Great guy. And Mike Melville is one of the best people I've ever met in my life. Mike Melville is the world's first civilian astronaut. He flew Spaceship One past the Kármán line in 2004, I think. And when I was owner of a Long Easy for about a little less than a year, I think, Mark Zeitlin would work on it. Sometimes he'd fly down from Tehachapi. That's where Mike Melville is. But the thing I remember the most is the first time I had a real problem with the thing, and I had one of those engine failures. The guy who came down to work on my Long Easy was the first civilian astronaut. Mike Melville just flew down and just helped me. You know, we took the cowl off, and he said, "Oh, here's your problem." And I said, "By God, that is the problem." Yeah, Mike is a great guy. My favorite story that Mike told me personally, just for those, because you mentioned him by name, and he certainly is an amazing guy. By the way, the first civilian astronaut was an African American. Where did I get that question from? I guess I must have caught it in the stream here, didn't I? Huh. I guess I did. Anyway, so here's the best story Mike ever told me. For those of you that are fans of aviation, I'll make this quick. Burt Rutan is I've known a lot of bright people. I've known a few geniuses, but I've never known anybody who was as far out of the box as Burt Rutan. And his ability to visualize things and and just simply, Burt Rutan had a problem when he was trying to build the world's first private suborbital vehicle. He needed it to go fast on the way up, and he needed it to go slow on the way down. That's the fundamental problem: fast up, slow down. So, does he talk about speed brakes or flaps or anything? It's not going to do it. So he breaks the airplane in half. That's what he does. He flies it up, and then when it gets to the top, he breaks it in half, and then it comes down in half, like it's just been cracked in the middle. Comes down at 90-degree angle to the tail to the fuselage, and then he puts it back together again, lands the thing. Who can think of that? Nobody can think of that. Nobody except for Burt. So Burt has built a number of airplanes, and a great number of them, I want to say 25 or something, have been built and flown out of his designs. And one of his coolest designs was called the Ares. It was a carbon fiber, wicked looking, potential ground attack aircraft, light ground attack aircraft. And my understanding is, a Fly in 2003 says, my claim to fame is Dick Rutan made me sick while doing an aileron roll in his long easy. Yeah. Anyway, I've driven around mountain trails in a little Polaris with Dick Rutan and had a lot of fun doing it. So anyway, here's the story Mike told me. So apparently they actually did get to mount the the GAU, the giant gun, and they put it on the Ares, which is a very light airplane. A-10's not terribly heavy, but twin engine, made of aluminum, steel ribs, and they put that gun on the Ares for a test thing, and Mike was flying the test flight. So he's rolling in with this super light thing called the Ares, which has been terribly modified since then, by the way. It's been just completely, maybe it's the Proteus. No, the Ares, it just after it was done. So anyway, so he goes in and he's doing this attack run, and Mike told me that when I fired that gun, I felt absolutely certain that the aircraft was suddenly moving backwards through the air. That was how much kick this thing put out. I thought that firing that gun had actually stopped the aircraft and was knocking me back through the air backwards. I thought, sounds like a bit of a kick, Mike. He said, yeah, I bet it was. Okay, moving on here. I'm sorry, Facebook, but I think I can at least get through the questions here. Judy Sheeks. Hi, Judy. Hi, Bill. Welcome back. Thank you. Good to be back. I've never heard this before. Regarding the Vegedant's speech last night, I didn't see the one last night. I didn't even know he made it until today. Was he calling for patience because of something nefarious, or was he just trying to blunt the results of what I hope will be a massive red wave? Frankly, I'm amazed that election results take so long to come in. Someone mentioned last night that states can tell us where a winning lottery ticket was sold within minutes. The credit card companies can keep real-time data on millions of purchases a day. If the government wants to quickly and efficiently count the votes, it can be done. We've got technology unheard of in the elections back in the 70s, and back then we knew the results by the end of the night. Amen and hail Judy. I think we've covered most of that, hopefully, but just to button up what you're saying here, I'd rather have accuracy than speed. But the salient point is, given the examples you just gave, that means we all know that any state is capable of delivering reliable results, the accurate results, very quickly. Florida was a perfect example in 2020. Florida is the third most populous state now, fourth, one of those two. And Florida ran them through the machines, got out a reliable number quickly. The states that didn't get out a number that night were the states that had a bunch of tinkering to do. So there you go. There it is right there. Fly in 2003. The longer they take to count increases the opportunity to cheat. Correct. That's exactly it. Period. Now, as I've already addressed a lot of that issue before, I'm not so impressed with the new technology. I'm especially not impressed with electronic voting machines, and I think we need to go back to paper ballots and most importantly, election day, in-person voting, because mail-in voting is just a license to steal. It's just that simple. And if you didn't believe it before, you might want to watch 2,000 Mules, and you'll be clear just exactly how much fraud is going around, not quite in broad daylight, but certainly not with like the highest possible levels of security, meaning, there you go. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Action context says Democrats' victory strategy is count until you win. Yes, and that goes back to 2000, because the 2000 election in Florida between Bush and Gore was actually very simple, right? What does the law say? Well, the law says that the votes in Florida are to be counted by the machine. So the machine does a count, and Bush wins by a narrow margin, no question. What happens then? Well, the law says if it is within a certain margin, I don't know what the margin is, maybe 1 or 2%, whatever it is. If the margin of victory is within a certain narrow margin, then the law says that you can do a recount. So they did the recount, and Bush won that too. And that should have been the end of it, period, right? Period. When you started getting people with the hanging chads, now you know you're dealing with people who are trying to finesse the system, trying to get a result. And once again, they're using the same excuse that they used when we were talking about voter IDs a few minutes ago. Well, some old people, they punched ballots, but they just filled the ballots out wrong. Well, I'm sorry to tell you then, look, a ballot is a process. Voting is a process, and there are rules for the process. Not a lot of them, really, actually pretty simple. But the ballot isn't your opinion. The ballot is essentially a legal document that you submit, and if it's incorrectly submitted, then that's on you, right? There are instructions there, and if you value your vote, you might want to check this thing before you submit it. So this business about, with these guys, is that a dimpled Chad? Was somebody trying to poke through? They didn't have the strength, to punch through this hole, but they did on all the other ones, maybe they were just getting, their blood sugar was low. That's when you allow it to get to that point, then you're complicit in your own extermination, right? George Bush should have been saying from the beginning, what does the law say? The law says count it once. If it's so close, count it again. We counted it once, I won. We counted it again, I won. Period. The end. Right? The end. But no. When you got the media, you can do it. Well, what about if the voter intended to vote one way, but the vote actually came out the other way? Don't you think we should be, trying to get what their intent was and not steal their vote? No. If they can't fill out the ballot correctly, then that ballot is then. If you cannot fill out a ballot, then you don't deserve to vote, right? You're not being excluded. You're not being excluded because of your race, sex, national origin, sexual preference. If you can't put the dots on the dots, then this election thing is a lot more complex than your capabilities are. Then that's it. A ballot is an action. A vote is an action. It's not just your opinion, it's an action. You have an opinion, and then you have to go through these steps in order for your opinion to become viable and count. And so long as no one is preventing you from going through that process, this idea of voter suppression is absolute nonsense, ridiculous. It's not voter suppression if somebody makes a mistake on their ballot. And to pretend that we're going to have teams of lawyers now and observers trying to divine what they really meant rather than what they actually did, why did Republicans allow it to get to that point? Why? Right? So what happened in Florida was the strategy was keep counting until you have the win. And that's what they did with Al Franken's campaign. Right? Franken lost that election. And they just, there's still ballots coming in. Well, if they're still coming in, it doesn't matter because this is election day. They have to be in by this point. And if they're not in now, then they're lost. Well, no, it's not fair to the people. So the ballots are still coming in. And I recall specifically in the case of Franken, it was, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's something close to this, right? Where, look, why do you know? We found a truck full of ballots that apparently had gotten a flat tire or something. Really? Yep. How many ballots are in there? 2,000. How much is Franklin trailing by? 1,800. Really? Okay. So how did the votes break? Turns out that every single one of those votes was for Al Franken. Well, the chance of 2,000 votes all being for Al Franken in an election that is that close to 50-50, the nearest whole number to that is 0. It's 0.0000000000000 chance that is real. Of course it's fraudulent. We just went along with it. And if we go along with it, then we deserve what happens. Let me see here. One's a little theoretical for me, I think, and this one's awful long. Eduardo, who I think said had to check out, he says he regrets to inform you that we've lost South America to the left. Brazil, its last bastion of freedom, shall become its newest iteration of Venezuela, like Argentina and Colombia already. As of next year, as the presidency fell to the convicted for corruption yet released by an equally corrupt Supreme Court, Luis da Silva. The election was filled with foul play on the part of the left. Okay, and he goes on into details. They knew of a fraud attempt, the censoring. So basically, they just had their 2020. Eduardo, I'll just tell you now what I told myself and our little circle here back in 2020, and I said this because it was the only bright spot I could find. It wasn't the way I wanted it to go, but given it, this is it. In 2020, after it became clear that this travesty was actually going to happen, I said the only way to cure people of socialism and progressivism is to give it to them, and that's what we did. And it looks like my theory is correct. It looks like by giving America the progressivism straight up, this is what they want, folks. They've been wanting this forever, but now they've got a chance to actually do it. And so now we see all of this defund the police. We saw their behavior during COVID. We saw all the stuff. We saw the trans athletes, all of it, right? So, presumably Brazilians are going to have to go through this as well. And hopefully they'll get the same education that we seem to have gotten. It's going to be very interesting to see how the country looks 6 days from now, not 5 days from now, 6 days from now. How the country looks. Because there's one thing I am sure of, and sounds like it's bad news, it's actually good. This is one thing I'm sure of. If we win as big as we do, the left will not change course. They will double down. If we win big, they will be convinced it's because they weren't progressive enough. I guarantee you that's what they will do. They don't have it in them to change course. They're ideologues and they're lunatics and they're much like the communists in this regard, not just in terms of their outcomes, but in terms of this magical thinking belief that they are infallibly right. So, if they lose the way I think they're going to lose, then they will become more progressive, not less progressive. And that will continue until that party essentially doesn't win anything anymore, at which point it's possible that they will rebrand themselves and move away from this catastrophic policy of theirs. Now, the downside, or not the downside really so much as the obligation is, if we win this thing big, then we have to deliver. And we cannot deliver legislation with 2 out of 3. So we better do something pretty aggressive to make it clear to the people who had voted Republican for the first time that this was a good choice for them. And if that means going to them and saying, this is what we want to do to improve your lives, and that Democratic president has blocked it, and we're doing everything we can here within the law, do that. Do that. Well, Risha says the prediction the left will call us poll watching, voter suppression, and intimidation, and try to invert the cheating. And that worked. It worked in the past. But I think that you can just eventually call racism, when you're calling racism over things like, white bread or black holes, when you're saying that that's racist, then when you say that voter suppression is racist, now we're at the point where, oh, really? What a shocking surprise, So what happens when you overuse your single weapon, right? So there you go. Rusha, I'm sorry, I'm going to skip that one. It's just, if you bring it in next time, it's awfully esoteric, and I'm getting close to wrapping up time. So I got 1, 2 to go, and I'll take those. And if you want to bring that back next time, I'll take it first thing, I promise. All right, here we go from Charles Tomes. I would imagine that's probably a relation to C.P. Tomes. From an undisclosed location at 35,000 feet, Darth Chuck the Merciless asks, I already like it. Recently, I was face to face with the Demon, a founding member of a famous hard rock band who said when asked about the Donald, quote, I have known him for decades before he ran for president. One word, relentless, driven. Unlike other politicians, he says what he means and what he believes, unlike other politicians who say what they think you want to hear. Discuss. That is all. All right, Mr. Tomes, that's what we will discuss. So let's take the most, let's just take the most pertinent example today. I checked on this and I wanted to make sure that this was true, but I did get it sourced from two different places and a third one anecdotally. Because frankly, I thought this was too good to be true. I've been an amateur historian for quite a long time, and the thing I study in history is warfare, military history. That's my bag, man. And not just of the United States, but throughout the world. And so it's not a question of my opinion. Looking at the evidence of how humans have behaved before becomes pretty clear what causes wars and what prevents wars. So, it is credibly reported that at some point during his presidency, Donald Trump was having a private moment with Putin. I think they were at a dinner, but I'm not sure about that. But they were having a private talk, one-on-one talk, with just the interpreter. And Trump said, Vladimir, if you go into the Ukraine, I'm going to hit Moscow. He didn't say he's going to nuke Moscow. He said, I'm going to hit Moscow. And he didn't say, I'm going to hit Russia. He said, I'm going to hit Moscow. That's a profoundly intelligent thing to say. If he said I was going to nuke Moscow, then that's just plain saber rattling and threatening. But when he says I'm going to hit Moscow, he could mean a military strike. He could mean some kind of sanctions, but he probably means a military strike. Now, if you're Vladimir Putin, you have to ask yourself, is he bluffing? Probably. But then again, maybe not. He's done these kind of things before. So what Trump had done, when Trump says, when he speaks his mind and gets out of the diplomatic, jargon and all the rest of it, blah, 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 he's like, look, if you do this, then I'll do this. Just so we're clear, right? If you do this, then I will do that. That's a bank, right? You can take that to the bank. Now, if you're Putin and you want the Ukraine, then you have to ask yourself, okay, is this going to be as easy as I thought it would? The technical term for this is on a tactical level rather than a strategic level, but the tactical term for this is when Trump says, if you go into Ukraine, I'm going to hit Moscow, what he has done is he has enormously complicated the firing solution for Vladimir Putin. He's made Putin's assessment of success infinitely more complex and infinitely more unreliable, right? He's not only added variables to Putin's equation onto whether or not to go into Ukraine, but he's added variables of such monumental weight that you have to reassess the entire situation. So one of the things that you can say is, well, Putin can say, well, Trump is bluffing. Maybe, maybe not. And from everything I read in history, it's that maybe not bluffing that has kept the peace every single time. Every single time. Right? There you go. Astronerd for the win. This is a .44 Magnum, most powerful handgun in the world, and it would blow your head clean off. So you got to ask yourself one question. Do you feel lucky? Well, do you, punk? Beautiful, man. Beautiful. Astronerd, that's exactly right. I'm pointing a gun at your head. Maybe I've got a round left, and maybe I don't. So, you feel lucky? And now he's made it much more difficult. He hasn't made it impossible for Putin to invade Ukraine, but he's made it much more difficult. He made it difficult enough to have not taken the chance. But the second he sees, Captain Easter Bunny out there with his ice cream cone, wandering off the stage and shaking hands with people that aren't there, he's saying to himself, now is the time. People say that it was the botched evacuation of Afghanistan that caused I think, that caused Putin to make the decision to go. But ultimately, it's not that the United States handled that so badly, because there are some things that we can handle very well, and he knows it. The reason Putin invaded the Ukraine in 2022 is because he knew that the American president and his administration and the military, all of it, was absolutely, absolutely incapable of a coherent, aggressive, intelligent response. So, um, so he did, and he pretty much got away with it, except for the fact that he did not expect. I think the it's not just the U.S. reaction; it's the NATO reaction was much, much, much more muscular than I thought it would be, because this war would have been over a long time ago if it hadn't been for javelins in the beginning, and then HIMARS, and now all the rest of this stuff. Right? He went to war against NATO, and he bet the farm that it would just be Ukraine. And I maintain that the how do I want to phrase this? I know what I'm trying to say. I believe that Putin was certain that this former comedian named Zelensky, not a serious politician, a lightweight, a clown, basically. I know that when Putin was making his calculations, he was certain that faced with imminent personal demise, in other words, there are tanks outside your building, Mr. President, that he was going to run. And when Zelensky said, I don't need helicopters, I need ammunition, that was, it wasn't the turning point because it was right at the very beginning, so it's not really anything to turn. But when Zelensky said, I don't need a ride, I need ammunition, he said that was the moment that this thing turned into a war and not a rout. That instant, that moment in time, that just and the phrasing, which I'm sure he didn't think about, which is why I believe it, which is why I think it's so, why I think that sentence is going to go down with some of the sentence of it's going to go down with uh, we'll fight them on the beaches. It's going to go down with Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. It's one of those moments where somebody says something so profoundly true that it becomes legendary. It just turned the war on. If he had run, then I think I'm not saying Ukraine would have just simply completely crumbled, but I don't think their heart would have been in it. But when they hear the president of the country saying, I'm not going anywhere, I'm going to grab a rifle, and there we go. Now he's got a real problem. Now he's got resistance. And when they pushed them back from Kiev, which they did pretty much on their own, when they pushed the Russians back from Kiev, that was I think, the strategic turning point. After that, that bought them enough time to get U.S., NATO, but mostly U.S. weapons on the scene. And of all of the tragedies and the personal tragedies of Ukraine, the single great geopolitical strategy that Putin has foisted on his own country is he took the Russian army to war. That was a mistake. That was a mistake because I think the one thing everybody can agree upon is that I am much, 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 much less afraid of the Russian military now than I was before I saw it in action. Much, much, much less afraid. And furthermore, watching the Russians on the battlefield puts some kind of perspective on how effortlessly the U.S. military is supreme, right? I mean, it's almost like you would think that, given how successful the United States has been, 20 years of war, um, it makes it look like, yeah, of course, of course a helicopter assault would work. Of course a strike would work. Of course this would work, that would work. Of course it would. It's just automatic. It's not automatic. Nope. It's all down to doctrine. It's doctrine. And no one, that's why I'm not afraid of the Chinese militarily. It's not that they don't have the hardware, although I have some doubts about the hardware. I have plenty of doubts about the Sukhoi was it 52 Felon, supposed to be a match for the Raptor. I'll believe it when I see it. They've only got 4 of them in the world. Um, so um, they say the Russians are saving the best for NATO. Pusher says that in the YouTube stream. Pusher, I find that hard to believe. I find it hard to believe that you would be that close to winning the war and then have your entire ass handed to you and pushed back, and you're saving your, your knockout blow. The the forces that he has there are of progressively lower quality every day. He put the A team in, and the A team got its butt handed to him. And this idea that we're saving no, I just don't think that's true. In any event, um, uh, those weapons, NATO weapons. Oh, I remember doctrine. Okay, Russia doesn't have this. China doesn't have this. Europe's got it, but they don't really have the hardware side of it. But they get the software side. They get the theoretical side. But it's air land doctrine, right? It's basically saying we're not fighting a land war. The battlefield is not the surface of Ukraine. The battlefield is the surface of Ukraine. It's the airspace over Ukraine. It's the oceans abutting Ukraine, and it's the outer space over Ukraine. That's the battle space, and you've got to do all of them. You've got to. If you can control all of those, then you win. The 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 Japanese had this exact same problem in World War II. Precisely the same problem. The Japanese army and navy hated each other more than they hated the Americans. They didn't talk to each other, didn't coordinate anything. They were just two completely separate and distinct entities. Meanwhile, when Japan is trying to take Guadalcanal in World War II, there's a Japanese Navy that has a set of objectives, and then there's a Japanese Army that has a completely different set of objectives. And both sides are dragging their feet, and, I don't want to do this. Well, I'm not going to do this, and I'm not going to lose my Navy to make this Army guy look good, blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, on Guadalcanal, you've got Army aircraft landing, you've got Navy aircraft landing, you've got Marine aircraft landing. You're all landing at Henderson Field. There was no Air Force then. So it's like, fire them up. Well, this is Navy ammunition. There was actually some of that at Henderson. You guys are Marine aircraft and you can't use this fuel. This is Navy fuel. That attitude lasted about 10 minutes. You got a fighter here. Yeah. You need gas. You're gonna go after the Japanese. Yep. Tank her up, man. And that ability to combine these things is why we're so successful. So, I'm not worried about China. I'm especially not worried about China now after I've seen Soviet weapons in play, and China's willingness to risk the Taiwan gambit has gone into the toilet. I don't think they've got it. I think before this happened, they thought they might have a chance. We got a lot of tanks and we got a lot of big hardware, and then some guy steps out from behind a tree and you don't have a tank anymore. And more to the point, I think they realized that while they probably think that the Taiwanese could be run out of weapons, they don't think that America is going to be run out of weapons. So, if their calculation was, well, I don't know if America will enter a war with China in order to defeat Taiwan. If I was president, I'd make it clear we would, but that would be how you would prevent this. But in any event, what they did learn was that if they go into Taiwan, they won't just be facing the Taiwanese; they'll be facing the Republic of China with every single weapon that America has at its inventory delivered to them through the back door, and that's a whole different thing. And Putin's behavior, Roy Hamill's talking about the way he treats his troops. I think you could make a case, just speaking as an amateur military historian, I think you can make a pretty good case that the single most important aspect of any conflict, number one, and I put this above supply, and I put this even above doctrine, and those are both more important than strategy or tactics or the weapons, but I think the single greatest factor is morale. I think it's morale. I think time and time again, we've seen that highly motivated people can be horrifically outnumbered in both weapons and numbers and everything, and they'll win. We saw it at Bastogne, and we saw it at San Luana. Not at San Luana, at Rorke's Drift. If you haven't seen the movie Zulu, I cannot recommend it highly enough. 1964, Michael Caine's first film. It is an astonishingly good movie. It really is superb. Action Comfort Tech. It looks like it's a copy here. Yeah. Um, oh, okay. Automod held a message. Action Comtech says, "Hey, Bill, the Marine Corps is getting back to its correct maritime mission and being retasked to shooting Chinese floating stock from islands while defending their launch positions. This scares the spit out of the Chinese." That apparently was held for moderation because somebody thought that shooting Chinese meant that, shooting like Chinese people here. Not talking about that. Probably should have said highly kinetic action against the People's Republic, Army of the People's Republic of China. So talking about doctrine and coordination and stuff, we're masters of it. No one else can do it. I mean, people like Germany can do it, but they don't have a navy, right? So it's not that they don't get the doctrine; they just don't have the hardware. But look, I knew the thing that the second I stopped really worrying about China was when I realized was that the ships that fly the Chinese flag, that organization is called the People's Republic Army's Navy. It literally is the People's Republic of China Army Navy, something almost like that. Um, okay, where's your heritage? Where's your traditions? Where's your culture? Where's the naval culture? You don't have one. You're not a naval power. And when Putin had to lie, and I'm not talking about these new recruits and all the stuff that they're going through. When his first in force, right, the force that was in there in the first couple days, when he had to lie and tell them that they are going on maneuvers in Crimea, and then they find themselves in Ukraine, I actually, honestly, God thought, and I still think this, I don't believe I've ever heard of that in history. I don't think Genghis Khan lied to his soldiers about where they were going. I don't think Xerxes lied to his soldiers. I think there's been plenty of times where soldiers didn't want to go, but I don't think anyone's ever been lied to about where they were going. When you have to lie to your troops like that, what does that say? I mean, what does it say? He's the last Tsar. Vladimir Putin, I'm sure of this, is the last Tsar. I don't know how long he's going to last. I thought he'd be out by now. There's no question about that. But he will be the last Russian Tsar. And what Russia becomes after this, I don't know. But he is the last KGB man in the government. And so, you know, and there's a significant amount of compelling evidence that he is terminally ill. And the People's Republic of China's, thank you very much for that, Action Comtech. The correct designation is the People's Republic of China Army's Navy. Are you afraid of the People's Republic of China Army's Navy? Are you afraid of them? Because I know there's only been two countries in history that know how to operate aircraft carriers, and that's the United States and the Empire of Japan. The Empire of Japan, the Imperial Japanese Navy wasn't the Imperial Japanese Army's Navy, it was the Imperial Japanese Navy. I just finished about how, look, they were going to lose anyway, but they could have done much, much better if they worked together, and they didn't. But you can't say that the Imperial Japanese Navy didn't have a culture. The IJN had a much more, I think morale among the Japanese Navy was much higher than it was among the Army, much higher. But I think morale's the number one thing. And if you get a chance to watch Zulu, you'll see what happens when you have, like, I don't know, what was it, 170 something British soldiers against 8,000 Zulus? You know? And by the way, it bears mentioning, just for the sake of it, that Zulu, which was released in 1964, is astonishingly respectful of the Zulus. It's astonishing respectful. You know, it's not just a bunch of guys going ooga booga. You know, they go to great lengths to show how brave those warriors were, how fit they were. These Englishmen in the movie will say that army can run for 12 hours without stopping. They can run for 12 hours and then go into battle. So they don't treat them like, you know, that's the first movie that I'm aware of, Western movie, that really just basically said, no, these guys are serious business. Rorke's Drift, yeah, absolutely. Rorke's Drift is one of those 5 cases in history that just almost defy imagination. They are such amazing stories, and not only did they tell the story correctly, but they they told the story masterfully. There's no reason to do Rorke's Drift again after they made Zulu. It's just an astonishingly good movie. It can't be improved upon. Um, and Rose Thistleart says the chosen few. Yeah, the Chinese mass attacks against U.S. positions, and now you've got the Americans pushed back to the Chosin Reservoir, and they're essentially out of supply, and they're cut off, and they're outnumbered 30 to 1 or something like that, and they just hold, right? They hold because they look. The reason they hold, right, is because the guys, because the Marines at the Chosin Reservoir and whatever Army guys were there. I honestly don't remember whether it was mostly Army or Marines. I want to say Marines. It doesn't matter. The Americans at the Chosin Reservoir or at Quezon or any of these other places, they fight like that, not because they've got powerful weapons on their side. They'll fight like that because they know that somebody's coming for them, right? They know that somebody's coming for them, and that is why that's why the morale is so high, because these guys know that if they get in trouble, somebody's coming for them, and even if the rescue arrives too late, they're not going to leave them there to rot in the sun or be paraded around town. Somebody's coming for them. They've got backup, whether it gets there in time or not, which is what launched me on that tirade of that speech in 2012, where I was saying we ought to break every window in Benghazi, because even if we couldn't get helicopters there for 4 hours, we could get jets over that city in 30 minutes. So why don't we just send some jets over that city and break every window? Let's send 14 Hornets over Benghazi and put them in at 700 feet AGL and push them supersonic, and let these bastards know that those guys that are up there on the embassy roof are not alone. That there are people coming. The sky gods are on their way, and you don't want to mess with the sky gods, so you better just back out now, man. That's what we should have done, and I wish we had done, but nevertheless. Thank you very much for that, Settle Cougar. Very nice of you. And what a fascinating name. Yes, John Pershing and a number of others are saying maybe time for the Japanese to build their own navy. Absolutely, it's time for them to build their own navy. And it was the First Marine Division. Thanks. Yes, the Japanese. This sounds so condescending. I don't know how to say it. I'll just say what came into mind. The Japanese have proved after World War II they know how to behave themselves. They don't want this. They're not looking for military glory. But at the same time, they realize, this American backup kind of depends on who the vegetant is, and the shame that I have to deal with in terms of us going back on our word is almost too much to bear. So yes, I had a lot of problems with the F-35, and I still maintain that the purchasing of the F-35 was shamefully criminal. With that said, I openly admit that I had underestimated that jet, and because of the vertical takeoff capability of the Navy version of that, the Marine version, I guess. You can now turn a helicopter carrier, an assault ship like Iwo Jima. Now it's an escort carrier. It's exactly what it is. It's an escort carrier like in World War II. It's not a full Nimitz class or Ford class, behemoth, but you've got maybe 20 of the most advanced aircraft in the world on this deck. When we came up with the vertical takeoff F-35, we essentially was the same as building another 5 or 6 aircraft carriers. Right? Is it the C? Thank you, Big House. F-35C can take off vertically, which means that all of these things that used to be helicopter assault ships that were designed to support marine landings, those ships are now mini carriers, and presumably U.S. doctrine is evolving to represent that, right? Used to be, okay, so these guys can go in and cover a marine landing, but now with the F-35s there, you can actually say, well, maybe we'll just go in and shoot down some bad guys' airplanes. Maybe we'll just do combat air patrols with this thing that used to be a helicopter platform, boom. They looks like the F-35 has a nickname that's not going away, which is unfortunate, but You know, it's also kind of, I guess it'll end up being like the warthog or the great smoking thunder pig. So the pilots are calling the F-35. They're calling it Fat Amy, uh, and it's not easy to mistake why, because it's kind of a squat little thing, and it's got a short nose. But in any event, it looks good. The F-22 is an astonishing piece of work. I just don't believe the Chinese. I will believe the Chinese and the Russian stealth fighters perform the way they say they perform when I see them in combat. Until then, Eric Blake says, "Fat Amy," as in Schumer. No, but bonus points for that. Um, yeah, an active and action Comtech says the unofficial Marine Corps motto: "No better friend, no worse enemy." That should be on our money. That should be that. That is what's the military doctrine of the United States. What is your geostrategic statement? If define the United States of America, define it. No better friend, no worse enemy. That's it. That's it. That's that simple, really. Friend of what? Freedom. No better. If you're fighting for freedom, you got no better friend. If you're fighting against freedom, you've got no worse enemy. That's it. Period. That should be it. Yes, Marusha points out the history of America's history of turning our worst enemies into our best friends. That's the genius of it. That's never been done before. Never been done before. Dave Big Booty says you drop a few Amy Schumers into the enemy's country and there will be the equivalent of a nuclear winter. For some reason, reading the first part of that sentence, dropping a few Amy Schumers produced a scatological response for some reason. I don't know why. We're going to do one more, and then we're done with the membership page, and that's the advantage of being a paying customer. You're right, Rose. I was kind of being facetious just a little bit. You're never going to beat Curtis LeMay, man. To me, is I think that maybe the best single thing I've ever heard a military man say. I've told the story 100 times, very quick. When Curtis LeMay, after World War II, when he was building the Strategic Air Command, which was our nuclear deterrent before we got the subs online, or the ground-based missiles. So when Curtis LeMay is building the Strategic Air Command, the motto of the not the logo, the emblem of the U.S. Strategic Air Command, which doesn't exist anymore, was a gauntlet. It was like a fist of a knight, a gauntlet with lightning bolts against a sky background, I think. And below that it said, "Peace is our profession." And somebody asked Curtis LeMay, one of the most ruthless generals we've ever had. Somebody confronted him about that and said, "General LeMay, you claim that you're the Strategic Air Command. You say peace is your profession, but you now have more destructive power than anything in history. What on earth would make you say that for your motto?" And LeMay said, No, peace is our profession. War is just something we do for kicks." That is exactly, precisely, that is the posture that I would want. That's exactly, if I was president, that's exactly what I would want. That'd be the message I would send out. No, peace is our profession. We are dedicated to a peaceful world. Coming over there and kicking your ass, just something we do for fun. Boom, boom. You have complicated. You have what's the word? Now you complicated their firing solution. Okay, last one from Jamul. Hello, Jamul. Hey, Bill, do you think it's odd that the mainstream media has recently started talking about a deadly strain of coronavirus right before the midterms? Could the deep state be trying to bring back the coronavirus? Massive amounts of mail-in ballots with no checks and balances measures? Praise Vectron. Hail Vectron to you, too. The short answer is no. I don't think that's in play for this election. I think if it was going to be something in play, it would happen a long time ago. There's not time for something like that to spread between now and Election Day. However, when I heard that a laboratory had created a strain of, American lab, had created a strain of COVID with 80% fatality rate, my first question is, why did you do that? Number one. And number two, why did you announce that? I mean, bubonic plague, the Black Death, the worst thing that ever happened to the human race ever, the worst thing that ever happened, had a mortality rate of between 30 and 40%. So now somebody's taken one of the most contagious viruses ever and made it 80% fatal. However, however, this is cold comfort, by the way. I think this is what a Republican Congress can do. You see, it's what a Republican Congress can do. We can launch some investigations into why this was done, who did it, and why, and what has happened to this 80% fatal strain at Boston University. And maybe we want that all of it, including the documentation, so that we can burn it, kill it with fire, and you lose your federal backing. That's what you can do when you have the Congress. So Infidel 42 says it was 80% fatal among rats, not humans. That's interesting. Leave it to Dan Bongino, who to make the point here. It's an artificial virus because once you let something like that out into the population, there's a dynamic at work, and that is that the more lethal a virus is, the less contagious it has to be. That's not like luck or anything. That's just the equation. And basically it works like this. If you have a virus that's 80% fatal, then it kills off the host before it can replicate. A successful lethal virus is one that is hard to get, and especially one that takes a while for symptoms, like Ebola, any of these blood vessel diseases. I think you don't see symptoms, I want to say, for 8 days or something like that. That gives Ebola enough time to get into your system, multiply, and for you to spread it before it goes on. That number is called the R naught number, naught for meaning zero in British English. The R sub naught number is how many people will if you've got one infected person, how many people is that person going to infect statistically? And the higher the number, the more dangerous the bug is. If it's, I don't remember what it was for Ebola. I think it was less than 2. But if one infected person on average can infect 6 people, that's a worse risk than a virus that on average you infect one person with, obviously. And if it's below 1, then the virus dies out immediately, right? So if it kills you fast, that's bad for the people who die, but it's much harder to for the virus to maintain itself, because if it really killed people in 2 days, then everybody would lock themselves down seriously lock themselves down for a week, right? And when I say lock themselves down, I mean lock themselves down, and then it just burns out, right? That's it. Anyway, it doesn't even matter, and I don't care if it's 80% fatal in mice. I think by now we ought to realize that the risks of this outweigh the benefits, and this is a typical example of scientific hubris. I've seen it in artificial intelligence. I've seen it in search for extraterrestrials. I've seen it everywhere, where these scientists are absolutely sure that they got everything covered. No, they can't possibly go wrong. Well, that's what you've said before, and you've been wrong every time, right? Oh, no, we have fail-safes built in. I don't believe you. I don't believe you. No, I don't. First of all, you're a scientist, not an engineer. And secondly, you're doing this because you can, not because you should. And it's time to take your toys away now, because you don't behave yourself. Right? That's it. I'll Paint said, I don't see them ever getting away with lockdown ever again. I couldn't agree with you more, I'll Paint, unless it's something with a really high mortality, in which case the government doesn't have to lock you down. This is the thing. This is the whole story of COVID, right? The whole story of COVID was that the aggregate intelligence of 330 million people had it perfect after 3 weeks. After 3 weeks, anybody who was thinking about it, people who hadn't bought into the CNN COVID porn, after 3 weeks, virtually every person in this country with a brain, okay, I'll do that. Richard thinks. Every person in the country with a brain had done the fundamental research to say, how fatal is this thing? Okay, that's not too bad. Is it unique? I mean, is the fatality rate among every age group? No. It doesn't exist among 0 to 10. It essentially doesn't exist for 10 to 20. 20 to 30, it's a blip. 30 to 40, it's a bigger blip. 50 to 60, 70, and so on. So here it is. And every single individual American could look at this and say, where do I fit in this table? Well, if I'm in the highest possible mortality bracket and the mortality rate is 2% or 3%, okay, that's a risk. Now tell me about the 3%. Well, of the 3% that died, they had an average of 2.5 comorbidities. They had diabetes or emphysema or overweight. And if I'm none of those things, I'm thinking the chance of this being fatal for me is very low. It's low enough that I'm willing to go out. Now, if it turned out that that thing was killing 80% of everybody, my attitude towards the government wouldn't have to lock you down. You would lock yourselves down because you have the sense to know what is dangerous and what's not. You wouldn't have to be locked down by the government. You would say to yourself, okay, there's a wildfire out there. You would treat it the way you would treat fallout, right? We ain't going outside for 7 days, and then we're going to go out real carefully, and we're going to hose ourselves down, all the rest of it, So there you go. All right, Eric Blake. All right, so I think the question is what's my take on Twitter and Elon? Hey, there you go. That's sometimes there is a shot of wisdom that just goes right through you like a diamond bullet. Speak into the microphone. Talk into the machine. Roger Ramdet 59 says, to fear death is a choice. That's exactly it, man. I mean, really, that's exactly it. That's exactly the way I looked at this thing. My first response to Natasha when it was clear this thing was down there was I said, honey, I've looked at the mortality rate. Frankly, I think we ought to go down to LAX and start licking doorknobs. Let's just get it and get it over with. If we're going to survive it, we'll survive it. If we won't, we won't. But there's nothing. It's going. It's not. We're not going to be able to dodge this thing. Let's just go get it over with. Let's find out. Okay, so Twitter. So look, it looks like Elon. Well, he owns a company, so there's that. I heard today for the first time that he's going to fire 50% of the staff. That couldn't be better news. Elon Musk is not a conservative. I suspect he's really quite the libertarian, but Elon Musk does understand America, and he seems to genuinely understand the value of free speech from a purely mechanical point of view. He understands that freedom of speech is what leads to innovation, it's what leads to prosperity. All of the stuff that we have, and the reason America is so uniquely successful is that the free exchange of ideas means that the best ideas win, and the best ideas are almost always a synthesis of several ideas. So he understands the danger of stifling speech. I think his motivation is genuinely real. Yes, Reclaimer Bear says the British used their carriers well in the Falklands. Yep, pretty well. I agree. But it wasn't, I mean, I know the Falklands conflict fairly well. It wasn't, it wasn't a 4-year battle of fleets. They had 2 carriers, right? It was Invincible and Hermes, I think. And they had Harriers. And Harriers are, they're not terribly effective aircraft. They're cool that they can go straight up. And this was the 1980s, so yeah, it was absolutely cutting edge. The thing about the Falklands War is the Argentines were flying A-4 Skyhawks, and they were flying them 20 feet off the deck. And they got in underneath the air cover, and they did a lot of damage. They sank a bunch of ships. But yes, look, I know for a certain fact that the British invented the angled deck carrier, which allows you to launch and land at the same time. So there you go. Anyway, so Twitter. So first of all, Musk seems to be serious about this. Now that he's actually bought it, the changes are being made. There's a world where he says he's going to do something and he doesn't. I've never seen him do that. He usually does what he says he's going to do and does it quickly too. But he's firing half the staff. He's already fired the top management. Now, what interests me about Elon Musk and Twitter is the kind of almost like casual offhand things that he's talked about for Twitter in terms of Twitter becoming more of a content platform. Essentially, if I understand him correctly, just from reading the tea leaves, I think he has the idea of getting Twitter back to free speech, and then I think he's going to build Twitter out so that it'll be able to host videos, and uh, and if that happens, then it really could be game over, because look, we post all of our videos are hosted on Rumble. We put them on YouTube. We've had a couple of strikes. I don't know if we've ever had two strikes at the same time, but we certainly had at least three strikes. If you get a strike on YouTube, not a copyright thing, a strike, uh, then you don't get to post for a week. If you get two, then you don't get to post for 2 weeks. And if you get three, everything that was ever on your website comes down. And if you get two strikes or three strikes, they not only take your channel down, you can't get to the stuff. You can't download your own stuff anymore. They lock your stuff away from you. So if it turns out that this happens, then it could actually work because of the network effect. Trump put out a platform, social media platform, hasn't caught on because of the network effect. And the network effect is real simple. It's like the value of the network is determined by the number of people on it. And if I have a network that's really, really cool, but there's nobody on it, then it's worthless. So Rumble is a free speech platform, no question, but it's not easy to work with. It's not very well run. I'm very grateful for it, but it doesn't have reach. Twitter, on the other hand, comes with reach. So if he can turn Twitter into a free speech platform for tweets, and then decides to open up to videos, then the advantages of posting a video on Twitter as opposed to on Rumble is that you would think people would see it on Twitter. Same thing for Instagram and all the rest of it. So anyway, that's what I think about Musk and Twitter. I think he's real about the freedom of speech thing, and I think he's actually moving in the direction he said he would, and that we would expect he would if he is doing it about freedom of speech. And if he can do that, then he can. So Rumble is never going to displace YouTube because Rumble is not nearly as well run, and there's what, a thousandth of probably less than that of the people on YouTube. So you have to go to YouTube. But if you can find something to compete with YouTube and compete with them on the free speech thing, then you might actually have something that could really change the equation. It's going to change the equation anyway. So we'll see. Anyway, that is that about that. Yeah, okay. 9 o'clock, fair enough. This show is made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com who keep this thing going, and this is the third time in a row that we've gotten pretty close to 3 hours. So, by golly, if you're not paying for this, then you're getting your money's worth. Yeah, I guess that'll do it. All right, so unfortunately, no Stratosphere Studio on Monday because I will be en transit to Nashville and the Daily Wire and election coverage. And I will be back next Thursday for the Stratosphere Lounge. And a week from now, I imagine we will have a lot of fun things to talk about one way or another. But I'm feeling pretty good about it, so we'll see. Until next time, Mouseketeers, keep your powder dry, and we'll see you next Thursday.